Chapter 261. A Letter from Mrs. Fig and the Ministry of Magic. Harry had never felt so overwhelmed with power. Dudley, significantly larger and heavier, was pressed against him, causing Harry's teeth to chatter from the strain. Despite his disdain for Dudley, Harry couldn't bear the thought of seeing him harmed. The eerie black threads that had appeared earlier sent shivers down his spine, pulling him towards a sensation of falling into an abyss, igniting a fear that felt as though it touched his very soul. Suddenly, the sound of heavy, hurried footsteps broke the tense silence. Harry, on edge, instinctively raised his wand and spun around to face the source. Dudley, caught off guard by the sudden movement, stumbled and fell. Harry had braced himself for an attacker, but to his surprise, it was Mrs. Fig, their eccentric old neighbor, who appeared before them. Her gray hair was a mess, escaping from her hairnet, and a mesh bag jingled at her wrist. Harry, caught in the act, tried to conceal his wand. "Don't hide, you silly boy," Mrs. Fig scolded loudly. "What if they're still around? Oh, Mundungus Fletcher is going to pay for this." "What?" Harry asked, bewildered. He had no idea who Mundungus Fletcher was. If he had ever ventured into Knockturn Alley, perhaps he would recognize the name. "He left his post," Mrs. Fig exclaimed, her anger palpable. "Claimed he felt a frightened look and fled. Such a coward, leaving you unprotected. And now, a Dementor attack. Thankfully, I was tipped off in time. But we must hurry, Harry. We can't dally here. I have a bone to pick with Mundungus." Harry was taken aback. Mrs. Fig, known for her fondness for cats and her seemingly mundane existence, was aware of Dementors. His surprise mirrored the shock he felt during the Dementor attack. "Are you a wizard?" he blurted out, then, recalling the black threads, asked, "Was that your doing?" "I'm a squib," Mrs. Fig clarified, shaking her head. "Mundungus knows everything. How could I possibly fend off Dementors? He abandoned his post, leaving you exposed. I had to step in." "This Mundungus has been watching me?" Harry pieced together, recalling the loud noise that now made sense as apparition. "So you had someone under a car? And who's John Wick?" Mrs. Fig, ignoring the question about John, continued, "I rushed over as soon as I realized you were in danger. What will Dumbledore think?" She then scolded Dudley to get up, showing a surprising connection to Dumbledore that Harry hadn't expected. "Of course I know Dumbledore. Who doesn't?" Mrs. Fig said, urging them to leave quickly. "I can't protect you if they return." Fearing the black threads, Harry, with Dudley in tow, hurried back to the Dursleys' house. Along the way, Mrs. Fig advised him not to conceal his wand, dismissing concerns about the Secrecy Act. "Your life is more important than any punishment for using magic," she insisted. Harry, catching his breath, questioned why Mrs. Fig had never revealed her squib status to him. "I've been to your house so many times. Why keep it a secret?" Mrs. Fig expressed regret, explaining that Dumbledore had instructed her to simply watch over Harry without revealing too much. She feared the Dursleys would forbid Harry from visiting her if they knew the truth. As they neared the end of their journey, Mrs. Fig lamented over Mundungus's cowardice and wondered how she would report this to Dumbledore without the ability to apparate. Harry offered his owl for her to send a report. Meanwhile, Harry pondered the origin of the black threads, realizing neither Mrs. Fig nor Mundungus was responsible. Who, then, was behind it? Lost in thought, Harry was startled by a sudden, ear-piercing explosion. Mundungus had reappeared, but under what circumstances? Mundungus Fletcher finally mustered the courage to return, much to Mrs. Fig's ire, who was ready to unleash her fury on the perceived coward. "You have no idea how terrifying that man is. If he catches sight of me, I'm as good as dead," Mundungus protested, his face twisted in disarray. "Tress! Dementor! Harry encountered a Dementor! And you utter coward!" Mrs. Fig's anger was palpable, her voice rising as she hurled a can of cat food from her mesh bag at Mundungus, who could only yelp in response. "Dementor? Here? But why?" Mundungus stammered, shielding his head with his arms, a mix of confusion and fear in his voice. "I'm relieved Harry's safe. Did you manage to deal with it?" "No, it wasn't me," Harry interjected, his gaze fixed on Mundungus, the unexpected arrival. "There was someone else there, but I don't know who." Without another word, Mrs. Fig urged Harry to hurry back home, leaving Mundungus to rush off and inform Dumbledore of the incident. Once they reached Privet Drive, Mrs. Fig parted ways with Harry, stating she would await further instructions before heading home. Harry, accompanied by Dudley, made his way towards the Dursleys' residence, unaware of the watchful eyes observing him from the dimly lit attic of a neighboring house. "It's really a baby," John mused from his vantage point, his expression one of detached curiosity. "Dumbledore has taken such meticulous care of Harry, orchestrating his life from childhood. I wonder if that's something to be envied or pitied." John's thoughts then shifted to Mundungus, his lips curling into a sneer. "Mundungus, I've been more than fair to you," he reflected, considering his past leniency towards Mundungus' questionable actions, all in an effort to keep Dumbledore appeased. However, John's patience had worn thin. He had gradually taken over Mundungus' responsibilities, misleading him into believing he was indispensable, all the while planning to sever ties with him. "I've given you everything, a comfortable home, wealth, and power, yet you fail to show any gratitude," John lamented, puzzled by Mundungus's lack of loyalty. It seemed that a mere word from Dumbledore was enough to sway Mundungus, a testament to the fickle nature of people. Dismissing Mundungus from his thoughts, John's attention was captured by an owl heading towards the Dursleys. Harry had used magic outside of school, and John was eager to see how Dumbledore would intervene. Cloaking himself with a disillusionment charm, John vanished, intent on witnessing the ensuing drama at the Dursleys. Upon seeing their son in distress, the Dursleys were taken aback. Vernon's patience quickly evaporated as he confronted Harry. "What have you done to my son?" he demanded, his voice laden with accusation. "Nothing," Harry replied, facing his uncle's wrath. The tension between them was interrupted by the arrival of an owl, which dropped a large parchment envelope at Harry's feet before departing with elegance. Harry opened the envelope, his heart sinking as he read the letter inside. "Dear Mr. Potter, we have received a report that you performed the Patronus charm in the presence of a Muggle within a Muggle-inhabited area at 23 this evening. This act constitutes a severe breach of the decree for the reasonable restriction of underage sorcery. Consequently, you are hereby expelled from Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Representatives from the Ministry of Magic will be dispatched to your residence shortly to confiscate and destroy your wand." Chapter 262, Penny's Howler and Harry's Near Expulsion. Harry stood there, his expression blank, his mind numbed by shock. It felt as if a paralyzing dart had struck his consciousness. He had been expelled from Hogwarts. It was all over. He could never return. Vernon's yelling faded into the background, irrelevant to Harry's turmoil. Slowly, his thoughts began to coalesce again, and a pressing concern emerged. The Ministry of Magic intended to destroy his wand. He had to escape immediately. The thought of losing his wand was unbearable. But why was this happening now, when he had been warned in his 3rd year but faced no consequences? Ah, that was because Fudge had been there to protect him. Attempting to leave, Harry found his path blocked by Vernon, who demanded an explanation. "Get out of my way." Harry's patience had worn thin. "You have to stay here and explain how my son—" Vernon began, but Harry interrupted, wand raised threateningly. "Move, or I'll curse you." John, observing the scene from the couch, was lost in thought, unnoticed by the others. Harry and Vernon were still at an impasse when a loud bang startled everyone. It wasn't Harry's doing. An owl had collided with the window. The determined bird extended a leg, offering a small scroll of parchment. Harry, grasping at what felt like his last hope, unfurled the message. John, curious, peered over Harry's shoulder. The letter was from Arthur Weasley, informing Harry that Dumbledore had intervened at the Ministry of Magic on his behalf. He was instructed not to leave the Dursleys, to refrain from using magic, and to surrender his wand. Dumbledore really acts as if he owns the Ministry of Magic, John thought cynically. Despite his claims of disinterest in power, Dumbledore seemed to wield it freely, even appearing to supersede the Ministry's authority. Harry, somewhat pacified by the letter, decided against leaving. However, Vernon was incensed. As Harry explained the situation, mentioning the Dementors, Aunt Petunia turned pale, revealing that Dementors were the guards of Azkaban prison. This revelation shocked everyone, especially Vernon, who listened intently to Petunia's explanation. Soon after, another owl arrived, this one bearing news from the Ministry of Magic itself. They had decided not to destroy Harry's wand or expel him, though a trial was still pending. Harry sighed in relief, confident that Dumbledore would not abandon him. Vernon's reaction was mixed. He feared Harry's potential for revenge, but also wished Harry would leave. A fourth owl entered, this time from Sirius, urging Harry to stay put. John, watching the unfolding drama, felt a mix of amusement and annoyance at the predictable pattern of events. The hero in trouble, the secret protector, the intervention by powerful figures like Dumbledore and now Sirius. It's quite the spectacle, John mused, observing the unfolding drama with a mix of detachment and amusement. Harry, however, was slightly miffed by Sirius's message. Despite having fought off the Dementors himself, no one had praised his bravery. John found Harry's dissatisfaction amusing. Any other wizard, regardless of their blood status, would not have received such attention. Harry's privileged position seemed to have made him somewhat entitled. "Look at the savior Dumbledore has been grooming," John remarked sarcastically, noting Harry's arrogance. Harry's willingness to speak Voldemort's name openly, his smugness in the face of Vernon and Petunia's fear, all pointed to a certain complacency. Just as Vernon seemed ready to expel Harry himself, a fifth owl arrived, adding to the day's chaos. But this time, the owl wasn't seeking Harry, it was looking for Petunia. In the Dursley household, tension rose as a red howler letter addressed to Petunia lay ominously unopened. Harry, recognizing the nature of the letter, informed her it was a howler, causing Vernon Dursley to stiffen with apprehension. To Vernon, wizards were a dangerous lot, and the sight of the letter, now beginning to smoke, sent a wave of fear through Petunia. As the envelope burst into flames, Petunia screamed and dropped it, inadvertently sending it flying towards John. John, with a swift clap of his hands, silenced the letter before it could unleash its message. "Remember my last, Petunia," whispered the voice of Dumbledore, now barely audible. With another clap, John reduced the envelope to ashes, leaving the Dursleys, and Harry staring in bewilderment at the spectacle of a letter that seemed to vanish into thin air without a sound. "Why is there no sound?" Harry wondered aloud, puzzled by the silent howler. Petunia steadied herself with the support of a chair, while Vernon comforted her. Dudley, awakened by the commotion, could only stare in the direction of the vanished letter. John, knowing the excitement was over, discreetly exited the scene. In the solitude of the attic, John watched as a golden light enveloped a piece of ash, which then regrew into the red howler letter. He pondered Dumbledore's message to Petunia Dursley, Harry's aunt and Lily Evans' sister. John understood that Harry's true protection came from Lily's sacrificial love spell, not from being a so-called savior. The connection between Dumbledore and Petunia, a muggle, could only be through Harry. Handling the reformed howler with a casual flick, John used a ring-covered finger to prevent it from igniting again, then stored it away. His attention was drawn to a book on the table, The Tales of Beetle the Bard, specifically to the story of the Resurrection Stone. John mused over the tale, considering the possibility that the second brother's failure to truly resurrect his beloved was due to his misuse of the stone's power. He speculated that combining the power of the soul with the Resurrection Stone, and perhaps even involving the taboo power of the frozen box, might offer a way to truly bring back the dead. However, John recognized the complexity and the speculative nature of his thoughts. The following day, the Dursleys' treatment of Harry remained cold but unchanged. John observed this with a detached interest before heading to Johnny Silverhand's store. Mundungus Fletcher was absent, likely surveilling Harry from a distance. John reviewed a report on the quarter's investments, noting that aside from the Weasley twins' joke shop, most ventures were long-term. His gaze lingered on an entry showing an investment of 3,000 galleons, pondering the future of his endeavors. John had been pouring resources into a project with little to no returns. His gaze landed on the signature at the bottom of the document, Mundungus Fletcher. A smirk played on John's lips as he mused, "I was contemplating your termination, and here you've handed me the perfect excuse." He beckoned Tangmi into the room with a casual wave. "Take a look at this," John said, pointing to the document labeled Fatty Surfing Training. "Review this project, and then terminate Mundungus's employment." After a brief pause, a thought struck him, and he added, "And make sure he refunds every penny he wasted." John's instructions were clear, and his decision final. The project, which on paper had seemed promising, turned out to be a financial sinkhole, thanks to Mundungus's mismanagement. It was time to cut losses and ensure accountability. Chapter 263, Lupin and the Six Werewolf Brothers. Greed can lead a person to attempt swallowing more than they can chew. Mundungus Fletcher, a man driven by greed, had proven himself disloyal. Despite John's explicit warning against tampering with the funds, Mundungus couldn't resist the temptation and dipped his hands into the coffers of the Silver Hands Angel investment. Such betrayal could not be overlooked. John instructed Tang Mi to terminate Mundungus's employment and, if necessary, to have the security team search Mundungus's residence for any misappropriated funds. Mundungus returned home late in the evening, around 9 o'clock, content with his current lifestyle, a stark contrast to his past, where he had no stable living conditions and resorted to fare evasion to watch the World Cup. Meanwhile, Harry Potter found himself back in the confinements of the Dursleys' house, his life reduced to receiving 3 meals a day and little else, a harsh reminder of his own stark reality. Mundungus, reveling in his perceived superiority, expected deference from those around him. "Hey, didn't you see me? Shouldn't you be saluting?" he demanded, attempting to enforce a fabricated rule that clerks should greet him upon sight. However, the security team ignored him, and even the usually compliant clerks only offered him sneers. Frustrated and feeling disrespected, Mundungus demanded an apology, only to realize the clerk's salute was not meant for him. Turning around, he was met with the imposing figure of John, wearing his signature silver mask. Subconsciously, Mundungus knelt, acknowledging the authority of Johnny Silverhand. His flattery was excessive as he maintained a low posture, sweating profusely under the gaze of his boss, who seemed in no hurry to acknowledge him. "Mundungus," John's voice, slightly hoarse, broke the silence. "Do you remember what I told you?" Mundungus's fear was palpable as he stuttered. "Your Excellency Johnny Silverhand?" The lack of expression on John's masked face did nothing to hide his anger. Suddenly, Mundungus was lifted by an unseen force, gasping for air as if his throat was being crushed. The familiar sensation of impending death overwhelmed him, reminding him of his true status, not a trusted employee, but a thief who had overstepped his bounds. Just as Mundungus felt his life slipping away, the grip on his throat was released. Gasping for air, he was met with the cold declaration of his termination. Desperate, Mundungus pleaded for mercy, only to be silenced by the evidence of his betrayal, a report detailing his involvement in the fatty surf training scam. John's final verdict was unyielding. "Spit out everything that belongs to Johnny Silverhand. Everything you own is now confiscated." With those words, Mundungus's fate was sealed, his pleas for forgiveness ignored. John had no tolerance for betrayal, ensuring that Mundungus would return to his destitute past, a stark reminder of the consequences of greed and disloyalty. The Silver Hand members were stripped of their possessions and left exposed in the street. Tang Mi's voice was icy as he warned, "You'd better recover the funds quickly." Funds? Mundungus Fletcher shivered at the thought. The money was long gone, squandered on flying magic carpets he had been convinced would be a lucrative investment. However, upon their arrival, he discovered that the use of such conspicuous means of transportation was banned in the country. The carpets, now nearly rotting away unsold, symbolized his grave miscalculation. This left Mundungus in a dire situation, as he had no personal funds to repay the Silver Hands Angel investment, having resorted to deceit to obtain it in the first place. "It's all over," Mundungus lamented, realizing the futility of escape. The mere thought of defying Johnny Silverhand and facing certain death within days kept him rooted in fear. Despair enveloped him, regretting his momentary greed that led to his downfall. Meanwhile, as Barty Crouch Sr.'s election period neared, John held an application form for a werewolf community counselor position. Under his guidance, the werewolf community had seen significant improvements, including the establishment of kindergarten classes and employment opportunities, such as a popular werewolf-run massage parlor. Despite the alleviation of werewolf discrimination following the creation of the Wolfsbane potion, John was aware that complete eradication of prejudice was unrealistic. His aim was to leverage the community's influence to bolster Crouch Sr.'s electoral chances by advocating for werewolf representation in the Ministry of Magic. The ministry had seen advocates for the elimination of discrimination against werewolves, who, unlike house elves, were often forcibly transformed. With many young werewolves as victims, there was a growing willingness to support their cause. John's visit to the werewolf community marked his first personal engagement there, having previously delegated such responsibilities. The community, reminiscent of Hogsmeade, buzzed with excitement at his arrival. Old Jack, a figure of respect and leadership among the werewolves, greeted John with reverence. Under Jack's care, many young werewolves, once indoctrinated with hatred towards wizards, had found a new path. "Your Excellency Johnny Silverhand," Old Jack greeted with a respectful bow, visibly aged since their last meeting. His efforts in establishing the werewolf massage parlor had not only provided jobs, but had also solidified his status within the community. "Old Jack, your place has become very lively," John observed with a smile, reassured by the evident progress. Presenting the application form to Jack, he watched the older man's reaction turn from shock to disbelief. "My lord, is this true?" Old Jack was astounded at the prospect of a werewolf gaining a position within the Ministry of Magic. John's response was a chuckle. "It depends on you. The Ministry of Magic will conduct a review soon." His words implied a significant opportunity for change, resting on the shoulders of the werewolf community and its leaders. "I hope you can show your best attitude." There was no need for excessive enthusiasm. As long as the Ministry of Magic recognized that the werewolves had curbed their aggression, negotiations would be smoother. Old Jack was still grateful when John returned from experiencing what he humorously referred to as a werewolf massage. Even after John's departure, Old Jack remained buoyed by excitement. However, his mood quickly soured when an unexpected visitor arrived. Upon seeing the man, Old Jack's face fell. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his voice icy. The visitor, looking more worn than when he was known as Johnny Silverhands, had swapped his usual suit for plain clothes. Lupine, noticing Old Jack's guarded stance, offered a wry smile. "I want to talk to you." "What is there to talk about? You ungrateful wretch. Johnny Silverhand gave you employment, and how did you repay him?" Old Jack was livid. Working at the Johnny Silverhand store was a point of pride among werewolves, and Lupine's resignation had deeply offended Old Jack. Lupine had been tasked by Dumbledore to recruit werewolves from their community, anticipating Voldemort's return and the likelihood that he would seek to enlist the werewolves as well. Dumbledore understood that, like giants, werewolves could be a formidable force. However, he had overlooked the fact that the werewolves had evolved, no longer the marginalized group they once were, thanks in part to the financial support from the Johnny Silverhand store. Now, with an application form from the Ministry of Magic in hand, Old Jack saw a golden opportunity to improve the werewolves' standing and was determined not to let it slip away. Despite Lupine's attempts at persuasion, Old Jack was unyielding, resorting to insults. "Severin, Ace, escort our guest out," Old Jack commanded, still seething with anger. Lupine found himself being ushered out by two of the younger werewolves, a male and a female. Old Jack had adopted 6 werewolf children in total: Chu Di, Jack, Sophie, Severin, Ace, and Tyro. Chu Di, the eldest, had pursued magical education and went on to establish a preschool within the werewolf community. Sophie had trained in werewolf security at the Johnny Silverhand store, aiming to become the security captain. Jack was the first among them to attend Hogwarts. These 6 were affectionately known as the 6 werewolf siblings, each carving their own path but united by their shared heritage and Old Jack's guidance. Their stories were a testament to the changing times for werewolves, a shift that Old Jack was fiercely protective of, even if it meant turning away old allies. Chapter 264, The Savior and the Savior on the Cloud. Remus Lupin's feelings towards Old Jack were mixed with a sense of helplessness and gratitude. As a werewolf, Lupin had once found solace and friendship in Old Jack during his darkest times. It was Old Jack who had provided him with shelter and clothing when he needed it most. For that, Lupin was deeply thankful. Old Jack, himself not a victim of Fenrir Greyback's cruelty, had chosen to stay within the werewolf community, offering his support to the younger werewolves. With the community now evolving beyond its past animosity towards wizards, Lupin felt an even stronger urge to protect this sanctuary. He feared the devastation that would ensue should Voldemort ever find his way here, knowing all too well the potential harm that could befall the werewolves. The werewolf community had grown significantly, besides becoming a force that could no longer be overlooked. The enigmatic Johnny Silverhand, whose intentions remained unclear, was a source of concern. As the community's second leader, Lupin couldn't help but worry about the possibility of facing another Voldemort. The day after being expelled, Lupin made his way back to the werewolf community. The Order of the Phoenix had informed him that this was his final opportunity. After today, he was to join the others in ensuring Harry Potter's safety. The recent Dementor attack had heightened the Order's vigilance. As the boy who had defeated Voldemort, Harry's protection was paramount. This was a promise Lupin had made to Dumbledore, and by extension, to James and Lily Potter. Both he and Sirius Black were prepared to lay down their lives for Harry if necessary. Old Jack was supervising Tylo's homework when a knock at the door interrupted them. His initial smile vanished as he prepared to unleash a curse, but Lupin's sincere voice stopped him. "Old Jack, may I have a few minutes of your time? After this, I promise not to bother you again." Reluctantly, Old Jack glanced at Tylo's sleepy form, then stepped outside and closed the door behind him. "What do you want?" he asked warily. Lupin, with a heavy heart, inquired, "Why do you resist? The Dark Lord has returned, but Dumbledore can ensure your safety." "Dumbledore?" Old Jack scoffed, his patience wearing thin. "He won't give my boy a fair chance." "But Johnny Silverhand is a dangerous man, a dark wizard who has taken many lives," Lupin argued. "Enough," Old Jack snapped, his anger palpable. Yet, determined to make Lupin understand, he decided to show him something. Motioning for Lupin to follow, they walked through the werewolf community under the moonlight, grateful that it wasn't a full moon night. They stopped at a tree marked with scars from werewolf battles, a grim reminder of Fenrir Greyback's cruel practices. Yet beneath this tree, a group of werewolves gathered, their faces a mix of old and young, some bearing scars and others with mutilated bodies. They were playing chess, a scene of peaceful camaraderie that seemed almost surreal. "Damn it, I lost again," grumbled one. "Can you even play?" teased another. "Where did you learn wizard chess?" asked a third, genuinely curious. A scarred, middle-aged werewolf replied, "I learned as a child, but never touched it again after being bitten. If not for Silverhand, I doubt I'd ever experience the joy of sitting down to play chess again." His opponent, a werewolf with a receding hairline, nodded in agreement. "I never dared dream of such a life. Before, survival was my only goal. I never allowed myself to want more." The werewolves, once marginalized within wizarding society, found resonance in these words. Previously unable to secure employment, or if they did, facing constant discrimination, they now experienced a semblance of normalcy and community. Discovering they were werewolves often led to a life of exile and rejection. For many, the dream of an ordinary life was unattainable, as society pushed them away time and again. Some chose to retreat into the wilderness, embracing a solitary existence in the forests, while others, fueled by resentment towards the wizarding world, aligned themselves with Fenrir Greyback. Deprived of even the most basic rights like education, werewolves found themselves trapped in a cycle of despair. Remus Lupin understood this plight all too well. Despite his struggles in society, he was considered fortunate among his kind. After being bitten, he still had the chance to attend Hogwarts, where he excelled and even became a Gryffindor prefect. However, his achievements did little to improve his standing in the wizarding community. Post-graduation, he found himself marginalized, a stark contrast to his less competent peers who navigated life with ease. Following Voldemort's defeat, Lupin's primary concern was to ensure he wouldn't harm anyone during his transformations. "Now, thanks to Lord Johnny Silverhand, I can earn a living doing what I love," Lupin said, his voice tinged with relief and gratitude. He had become a professional wizard chess player, a career that, while modest in earnings, allowed him to afford his monthly dose of Wolfsbane potion. "Lord Johnny Silverhand has given me a new lease on life. In this community, I'm no longer subjected to wary glances," another werewolf expressed, his words echoing the sentiment of many around him. Stories of transformation and hope filled the air, from a werewolf who found acceptance and a job in Nocturne Alley, to a young man who, for the first time, was not judged for his condition in a bookstore. A couple shared their joy of starting a family, something they believed impossible before the establishment of the Little Wizard Foundation by Johnny Silverhand. The gathering was a mosaic of individuals who had found solace and a sense of belonging under the banner of Johnny Silverhand. From families adopting werewolf children to parents of newly transformed werewolves, each person had a story of redemption and newfound hope. Lupin listened in silence as old Jack spoke, his voice carrying the weight of experience. The wizard you deemed dangerous is our savior. He may not have the illustrious aura of Dumbledore, but he has changed our fates. Dumbledore, revered as he is, never took steps to truly change our condition. Johnny Silverhand is tangible. He has fought for us, established schools for our education, and supported werewolf entrepreneurship. The Little Wizard Fund even ensures that young werewolves have access to Wolfsbane Potion. These actions have made a real difference in our lives, old Jack continued, his gaze fixed on Lupin. Remus, the world may turn its back on Lord Johnny Silverhand, but we cannot afford to. Even in death, we must remain loyal, old Jack concluded, his advice to Lupin blending the wisdom of age with the sincerity of friendship. Despite never having formal education, old Jack's insights revealed a deep understanding of their plight and the transformative impact of Johnny Silverhand's interventions, especially in contrast to the false hopes once placed in Voldemort. Voldemort would never consider transforming a werewolf into anything other than a merciless killing machine. Similarly, Dumbledore, despite his wisdom and power, could not fully comprehend the plight of the werewolves. They were both too removed, too ensconced in their own battles, to see the werewolves for who they truly were. We have found our own path to salvation. We do not require another to forge it for us, declared old Jack with a firm resolve. His statement, simple in its delivery, resonated with a profound impact. It was a declaration of independence, a refusal to return to the shadows from which they had emerged. Remus, having basked in the sunlight, felt its warm embrace, and tasted the sweetness of life. We refuse to retreat into the dark abyss, even if it means facing death itself, he continued, his voice steady and unwavering. These words, though spoken softly, echoed loudly within Lupin's mind. A realization dawned on him, a voice whispering a truth he had been too proud to see. Remus, lay down your arrogance. They do not seek salvation from you. They have already stepped into the light. This moment marked a turning point for Lupin. It was a humbling reminder that the werewolves, his brethren bound by curse and circumstance, had found their own way to cope, to live, and to thrive beyond the darkness that had once defined their existence. They did not see themselves as victims in need of rescue, but as survivors, warriors who had fought to reclaim their place in the world. And in this realization, Lupin found a new respect for their journey and a new understanding of his role among them. Chapter 265, Old Batty and the Election. John didn't give much thought to old Jack's loyalty. He believed his actions hadn't been particularly extraordinary to earn such devotion. Perhaps his perspective differed from others. Dumbledore, despite being a pureblood and claiming no prejudice against any wizard, carried an inherent sense of superiority deep within, a trait he himself might not have recognized. This subtle arrogance, akin to the inaction observed in the Celestial Dynasty, only surfaced in matters crucial to the survival of the magical world, with the notable exception of Harry Potter. Voldemort, a being conceived under the influence of a love potion, naturally lacked the capacity for love. His ambition was not to earn respect, but to instill fear through relentless terror and violence, rendering him incapable of understanding ordinary human emotions. Harry Potter, on the other hand, despite being raised in a Muggle environment, gravitated towards the wizarding world from the moment he encountered magic. It offered him a sense of security unmatched by anything in the Muggle realm. His acceptance into this magical community brought him endless wealth from Gringotts, the revered title of a savior, close friendships at Hogwarts, and the kindness of elders. This transition made his time in the Muggle world feel like a confinement. The unintentional arrogance displayed by wizards, even those like Mr. Weasley who were more accepting of Muggles, was evident when he inadvertently destroyed half of the Dursleys' living room. This arrogance was unnoticed, but prevalent. To werewolves, the title of savior was frequently mentioned. Dumbledore was seen as an unapproachable figure, Voldemort as a malevolent force, but it was only in the presence of Johnny Silverhands that they saw someone who could truly bring change, whether through deliberate displays of wealth or not. The evidence of his influence was undeniable. Following his promise, Lupin departed after the evening. John then focused on Elder Batty's election campaign, aiming to secure enough votes for him. The most straightforward strategy was financial influence. Direct monetary contributions were crude but effective, as the position of Minister of Magic seemed distant to the average wizard, and immediate benefits were more tangible. With John's support, Elder Batty's popularity surged. Despite Batty's poor oratory skills, John enlisted the help of the infamous Gilderoy Lockhart for speech training. This unconventional approach, reminiscent of Muggle election tactics, bewildered the simple wizarding community. Elder Batty's campaign promises, including passionate speeches, free eggs, and the promise of large, enticing pancakes, captivated many. He pledged to intensify efforts against illegal poaching of magical creatures, lead the local magical community to new heights, revitalize the manufacturing industry, and reduce or eliminate alcohol taxes in certain areas. His ambitious goal to suppress Death Eaters within 3 years and eradicate them within 5 drew significant attention. Even John was impressed by Elder Batty's bold promises. Lockhart's involvement, despite his reputation, added a layer of credibility to Batty's campaign, which was otherwise filled with grandiose but questionable pledges. Elder Batty's campaign ultimately succeeded, surpassing Amelia Bones by a significant margin. This victory was not without its challenges, as Amelia faced increased scrutiny and criticism from the press, magnifying her every action, no matter how trivial, into sensational headlines. The election's outcome and the tactics employed highlighted the complexities and peculiarities of the wizarding world's political landscape, where money, promises, and the influence of influential figures could sway public opinion and determine leadership. Amelia Bones was known for her strict demeanor towards her subordinates. What seemed like minor incidents were often blown out of proportion, leading to accusations of workplace bullying. For instance, a simple unsmiling encounter with Barty Crouch Sr. was sensationalized by the press as a sign of her dissatisfaction with the election results, painting her as petty and authoritarian. This portrayal frustrated Amelia, as it seemed to sway public opinion against her, stagnating her support in the polls. The mastermind behind this smear campaign was none other than John, who had orchestrated a series of articles with Rita Skeeter's byline. When the editor-in-chief of the Daily Prophet attempted to intervene, John, having invested in the newspaper, ensured the articles were published, further elevating Rita's status and securing her loyalty through generous compensation. Ultimately, Barty Crouch Sr. was elected as the Minister for Magic, much to the chagrin of Amelia and her supporters. This shift in power even led some ministry officials to replace their broomsticks, symbolizing their allegiance to the new administration. Crouch Sr.'s first major challenge involved Harry Potter's use of a Patronus charm in front of Muggles, a case that attracted the defense of Albus Dumbledore, the revered headmaster of Hogwarts. The involvement of these two prominent figures made the situation particularly delicate, as Crouch Sr. had to balance the ministry's credibility, public expectations, and Dumbledore's influence. Crouch Sr. resented Amelia for suggesting the misuse of Magic Office handle the case, perceiving it as a strategic move to undermine him. John, aware of the intricacies behind the scenes, saw this as an opportunity to diminish Dumbledore's influence within the magical community. Meanwhile, Harry Potter's life took a turn following Crouch Sr.'s election. Spending the summer at the Dursleys, he found himself alone when his relatives left to celebrate an award they had received. Suddenly, he heard noises from the kitchen. Initially fearing a break-in or an attack by Death Eaters, Harry cautiously approached, wand at the ready. The door burst open, revealing several figures in the dim hallway, all seemingly focused on him. Harry, feeling threatened, was taken aback by a familiar voice urging him to lower his wand to avoid accidental harm. This narrative, while capturing the political machinations within the wizarding world and a glimpse into Harry's precarious situation, benefits from clarity in character motivations and the implications of their actions. The portrayal of Amelia Bones and Barty Crouch Sr. reflects the complex dynamics of power and influence, setting the stage for further developments in this alternate magical universe. Chapter 266, Harry Potter's Aerial Duel. In the dim light, a raspy, low voice broke the silence. It was a voice Harry knew all too well, having been under its guidance for an entire school year. "Professor Moody?" Harry asked, his voice tinged with uncertainty. The figure before him was indeed Alastor Moody, though the memories of Barty Crouch Jr.'s impersonation of him at Hogwarts made Harry tense. Moody's response was gruff. "Professor or not, I can't say. It's been a long time since I've been in a state to teach. My standards have dropped," he admitted, a hint of bitterness in his tone, as he recalled being under the imperious curse. The tension in Harry's chest eased slightly at the sound of another familiar voice. "It's all right, Harry. We're here to take you away," said Remus Lupin, his voice a comforting presence. Harry's heart leaped with joy at the sight of his favorite professor and his father's friend. Lupin looked weary, his usual energy diminished by days of relentless activity, his best clothes showing signs of wear. Despite his exhaustion, Lupin's smile was warm and genuine as he greeted Harry. Harry, filled with questions but also reassured, returned the smile. "He looks just as I imagined," commented a witch with a heart-shaped face, her black eyes sparkling beneath short violet hair. Her lively demeanor brought a smile to Harry's face as she introduced herself. A dark-skinned wizard with a bald head and a gold earring, Kingsley Shacklebolt, observed Harry with a mix of scrutiny and nostalgia. "He looks exactly like James," he remarked, his voice deep and slow. "Except for those eyes," added another wizard, his silver hair and wheezing voice marking him as older. "Those are Lily's eyes." The gathering felt like a family reunion, with Harry being introduced to relatives he had never met. Moody, ever vigilant, insisted that Harry prove his identity, a reasonable precaution given Moody's own experience with impersonation. Lupin asked Harry to describe his Patronus, a question only the real Harry could answer correctly. "A stag," Harry replied, his nervousness evident. With Harry's identity confirmed, Moody couldn't resist lecturing him about wand safety, his paranoia undiminished by the years. "Don't stick your wand in there. Wizards better than you have burned their buttocks off," he growled. Nymphadora Tonks, the witch with violet hair, was amused by the idea of a wizard burning his own buttocks and inquired further, only to be dismissed by Moody's gruff advice. As they prepared to leave, Harry learned that Tonks had tricked the Dursleys with a fake award letter, a clever ruse that earned his silent admiration. Eager to depart, Harry waited for the signal to move out, taking the opportunity to familiarize himself with the members of the rescue party. Besides Moody and Tonks, there was Kingsley Shacklebolt, along with Iphias Doge, Daedalus Diggle, Emmeline Vance, Sturgis Podmore, and Hestia Jones. Each had volunteered to help escort Harry to safety. Harry was curious about Voldemort, but the mere mention of the name caused a collective shush from the group. Moody, ever the pragmatist, curtly silenced him. The tension of the moment underscored the gravity of their mission and the dangers that lay ahead. Confused, Harry was told, "You can't say anything here. It's too dangerous." Moody, his magical eye still scanning the surroundings vigilantly, suddenly focused on something outside. "Who's that?" he asked. Harry followed Moody's gaze to see a house significantly larger than the Dursleys. Lost in thought for a moment, Harry replied, "That's John's home." "John? John Wick?" Moody's tone turned serious, and Lupin's expression grew complex. Harry, surprised by their reactions, wondered if something had happened. However, Moody remained silent, turning away without further comment. Lupin sighed, leaving Harry feeling frustrated by his lack of knowledge. Yet, Lupin mentioned they would return on a broom later, which was at least some comforting news to Harry. As Harry went upstairs to pack his luggage, Tonks noticed his sour mood. Being a metamorphmagus, she changed her hair color, hoping to cheer him up. Unfortunately, Harry's thoughts drifted to Altdorf, and his mood darkened further. After packing, Harry and Tonks descended to find a red spark lighting up the sky outside, a signal. Moody, tapping Harry's head with his wand as if cracking an egg, cast a spell that made Harry feel a cold sensation spreading through his body. "Phantom Curse," Moody explained. "The first time you use it, It feels quite magical. Remember, the invisibility cloak doesn't fit well on a broomstick. The disillusionment charm will camouflage you better. Tonks couldn't help but praise Moody's wisdom. A second signal, a green spark, appeared. Moody unlocked the back door, and they stepped out into the night. Harry was thrilled to be leaving isolation behind, but his excitement was short-lived. Despite Moody's vigilant task assignments, they hadn't anticipated the magical defenses on John Wick's roof. The first three who attempted to fly up were knocked down as if they were mere dumplings. From the attic, a dog named Tom poked its head out and barked at them. August 8th was the day of Harry's trial, a significant day at the Wizengamot, where arguments would be presented. John had plans to undermine Dumbledore's influence. Even if you are Dumbledore, you must pay a price, he mused, seeing an opportunity to challenge Dumbledore's position as headmaster. Even if he couldn't remove Dumbledore directly, John was determined to force significant concessions. As John contemplated his plan, images of Dumbledore and flames flickered in his mind. Suddenly, he found his breathing becoming labored, and objects around him began to levitate. Touching his chest, John whispered to himself, "I didn't expect my patience to run so thin." Chapter 267, Transactions and Candidates. Once Barty Crouch Sr. assumed his new role, his previous position as director became vacant. Percy Weasley was promoted to director of the International Office of Magical Law, a role with significant authority over international magical affairs and a true position of power. Had it not been for Percy's lack of experience, Crouch Sr. might have considered him for a role in the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, but Amelia Bones strongly opposed the idea. Pierce, on the other hand, did not receive a promotion and was aware that his time in his current position was limited. He anticipated a transfer to the Wizengamot by the following year at the latest. Ozzy, having become an Auror, no longer needed to undertake missions abroad. Her unexpected promotion led Tangmi to invite her to a banquet at the manor, a gathering she was now qualified to attend. To her astonishment, the banquet was not a simple meal, but a lavish feast, attended by senior ministry officials, pure-blood families, and wealthy individuals, figures who once seemed untouchable to her. John, the organizer, donned a silver mask for the occasion. Barty Crouch Sr.'s ascension to Minister of Magic enabled him to secure a tax exemption policy for the Silver Hand wine cellar, effectively benefiting himself financially. The shift in power often brought substantial advantages, and though unspoken, Crouch Sr. would undoubtedly remember John's support and leave a token of appreciation for him. At the Silver Hand Manor, Crouch Sr., now transformed into the new Minister of Magic, wore a custom-made robe and displayed a genuine smile for the first time in years. His long-held aspirations were finally realized thanks to John. During a toast, Crouch Sr. expressed his gratitude. "Your Excellency, I will always remember your assistance." "Old Barty, today is a day for celebration. Let's set aside our worries," John replied with a leisurely smile, clinking his champagne glass against Crouch's. "You'll be quite busy in the future, but I'll leave a bottle of wine for you to enjoy when you find a moment of peace." Crouch Sr. appreciated John's words, which felt more like friendly banter than formal advice. After finishing his drink and releasing an ice bubble with a hiccup, he laughed. "This wine is irresistibly delightful." Pierce, standing nearby with a smile, stepped forward to assist the inebriated Crouch Sr. "Your Excellency, allow me to escort the minister." "Pierce, I believe you'll achieve great things soon," John said, raising his glass as Pierce respectfully bowed his head. After seeing Crouch Sr. off, John navigated through the crowd and approached the visibly nervous Old Jack. With a warm smile, he greeted him. "Old Jack, I'm delighted you could join us." "Your Excellency, Johnny Silverhand, it's an honor to be here," Old Jack replied, barely containing his excitement. "I never imagined a werewolf like myself could have a seat in the Ministry of Magic and a voice in its decisions." "Relax, old friend," John said, brushing fireplace ash off his shoulder and smiling gently. "You're a member of Parliament now. Minister Crouch plans to reform the Werewolf Capture Force and the Werewolf Registration Office. I believe Sophie and Chudai would be excellent candidates for these roles." "Is this really happening?" Old Jack's excitement at the news surpassed even his joy at becoming a member of Parliament. The Werewolf Capture Force, part of the Department of Magical Creatures Management and Control, was tasked with apprehending werewolves, a fate old Jack had narrowly avoided. Werewolves had long faced stigma and discrimination, and the Werewolf Registration Office was a place most avoided unless absolutely necessary, knowing that registration meant being under constant surveillance. In the future, the Ministry of Magic's decision to integrate werewolves into society signified a monumental shift. Werewolves were no longer seen as mere prey or outcasts, but as individuals capable of leading normal lives. Even those who had committed crimes were to be treated as sinners, not monsters. This news was so overwhelming that it nearly caused old Jack to faint from excitement. "My lord, how did you manage this?" he asked in awe. "It's all about the movement of power, old Jack. I promise you, the werewolf community is going to see better days," John assured him. He explained that werewolves, much like Nagini, were victims of a curse and shouldn't be held accountable for crimes they hadn't committed. John had strategized with Barty Crouch Sr., using certain positions within the magical community as bargaining chips to win over the hearts of many. These positions, though seemingly insignificant to the average wizard, held great value for werewolves, akin to the esteemed role of an auror. After formally presenting old Jack with his letter of appointment, John learned that Lupin had approached Jack, hoping to recruit him. However, Jack had declined. "Dumbledore has never aided a werewolf. Why would we join him?" he stated, his conscience clear. John was touched by his loyalty. "You're my friend, old Jack. I have no reason to doubt you," he said, embracing him warmly. Yet, Dumbledore's influence had already infiltrated the werewolf community, as both the Order of the Phoenix and the Death Eaters sought their allegiance. With the Death Eaters lying low and the Order in need of support, the power dynamics were shifting. Meanwhile, Voldemort's absence left his followers directionless, making them vulnerable to attacks from hidden factions within their ranks. John, pondering over his wineglass, couldn't help but wonder about Voldemort's whereabouts. As for the position of Hogwarts headmaster, John was still undecided. However, he had a clear candidate in mind for the Defense Against the Dark Arts professorship. He initially teased Tang Mi with the offer, knowing well Tang Mi's humble nature and loyalty would make him decline. "You're a Hogwarts graduate and the most qualified for the job," John jested, only to share a laugh at Tang Mi's expense. John's true intention was to appoint someone from the Ministry of Magic to counterbalance Dumbledore's influence. "Dumbledore holds too much power. We need someone to keep him in check," John mused, considering the necessity of appointing a ministry official to the role. He contemplated using Harry's unauthorized use of magic outside school as leverage to place his chosen candidate in Hogwarts without implicating Percy and his family. Turning his attention to potential candidates, John inquired about Ozzy Hurd, a name Tang Mi praised highly. "She's the best Auror, only held back by her background. She would have been the director of the Auror office by now," Tang Mi admitted, slightly embarrassed by John's scrutinizing gaze. "Then it's settled. There's no better choice for a Defense Against the Dark Arts professor than an Auror of her caliber," John concluded with a knowing smile, setting his plan into motion. "You truly value this friend of yours," John observed with a hint of amusement. Just ordinary friends," Tang Mi replied, his toes nervously scratching at the ground in embarrassment. John waved his hand dismissively. "For a good guy, you need to be a friend. But to handle a formidable figure like Dumbledore, sometimes you need to employ a bit of cunning." As John sifted through his mental list of potential candidates to confront Dumbledore, he found the task challenging. Then, a sudden thought struck him. An image of a woman clad in pink flashed in his mind. He pondered for a moment before asking, "Do you remember the woman in pink we saw at the fountain in the Ministry of Magic's lobby the day Barty was elected?" Tang Mi concentrated, his face contorting as if he had swallowed something unpleasant. "My lord, are you referring to Dolores Umbridge? If so, she's insufferable." It was rare for Tang Mi to display such frustration. "During my time as an Auror, I frequently found myself repulsed by that pink toad. Her desire for control knew no bounds. She aimed to dominate everyone." John's interest was piqued at this description. A villain with a strong desire for control seemed like the perfect adversary for Dumbledore. Eager for more details, he encouraged Tang-mi to elaborate on Umbridge's character, wondering if she was vile enough to stand against the likes of Dumbledore. From Tang-mi's account, John discerned that Umbridge was essentially cut from the same cloth as Pierce, albeit far more detestable. While Pierce might have been dismissive of those he deemed beneath him, he didn't actively seek to make their lives miserable. Pierce was more focused on currying favor with the higher-ups, sparing his subordinates from undue pressure. Umbridge, however, exerted her utmost effort to torment others within her reach. John found it fitting that Umbridge was the one to spread the fabricated stories about Amelia crafted by Rita Skeeter. "This is a talent," he mused, recognizing the potential in Umbridge's malevolence. With her overwhelming desire to control, Dumbledore might indeed find her unbearable. For John, employing someone as contentious as Umbridge was akin to presenting Dumbledore with a challenge. If Dumbledore found her presence intolerable to the point of wanting her gone, John would only offer his applause. Intent on setting his plan into motion, John snapped his fingers, signaling for Old Batty. Riddle, the black long-eared owl, promptly arrived, delivering an envelope in its beak. In this revised narrative, grammatical errors have been corrected, and the sentence structure has been improved for better readability. Descriptive details have been enhanced to provide clearer imagery, and redundant phrases have been removed. Ambiguities, especially regarding character motivations and plot developments, have been clarified, ensuring a more organized and engaging presentation. Chapter 268, Tom's Teeth and the Incident of Bleeding. The letter arrived as if by fate, its selection and preparation seemingly meticulous. Riddle, known for his fondness for the scent of lavender, a detail known by very few, served as Johnny Silverhand's official messenger, a role that garnered much attention. At Silverhand Manor, the original rose garden had been transformed by John, who replaced the roses with lavender, upon a special request from Pierce. Riddle, who often lingered in the garden, carried the natural scent of lavender with him. The letter, infused deliberately with the scent of lavender, was placed atop by Riddle when he delivered it. Upon opening the letter, John couldn't help but laugh in disbelief, affectionately ruffling Riddle's hair as he remarked, "It seems you've reaped quite the benefits." Tang-mi, driven by curiosity, inquired, "My lord, what does it say?" John, holding the envelope between his fingers and wearing a playful smile, replied, "Umbridge has recommended herself, hoping I would advocate for her to old Barty." The irony was not lost on him. He had intended to push Umbridge into a precarious position, yet she had unwittingly presented herself. Her desperation was palpable, nearly begging John for his endorsement. As a ministry official, Umbridge's alignment with Fudge had previously lent her some degree of significance. However, with Fudge's departure, her influence waned. The emergence of Barty Sr. had left her in a constant state of anxiety, fearing she might fall victim to his ruthless purges. It was common knowledge within the Ministry of Magic that Barty Sr.'s appointment was closely linked to Johnny Silverhand. A prime example was the demotion of the former Auror office director, Scrimgeour, who was relegated to the Centaur Liaison Office, a position of no real consequence within the ministry. For someone who had once been a contender for the position of Minister of Magic, this was a significant fall from grace. Umbridge, in her desperation to avoid dismissal, had expended considerable resources to secure a lifeline from Pierce. Her letter, a product of meticulous research, was crafted to appeal directly to Johnny Silverhand's preferences, eschewing unnecessary flattery in favor of straightforward arguments for her loyalty. Interesting. She's still exercising caution, John mused, noting Umbridge's attempt to cater to his supposed preference for lavender. He continued to pet Riddle, who had indulged in an excessive amount of dried fish. Handing the letter to Tang-mi, he observed her expression darken upon realizing it was from Umbridge. Pierce was wise not to overstep, John noted. Although Umbridge had been provided an opportunity, Pierce had preemptively sent a letter acknowledging his potential misstep. He assured John that if Umbridge was not to his liking, he would take immediate action to rectify the situation. John instructed Tommy to relay his approval of Pierce's actions, deciding that Umbridge would be left to navigate the treacherous waters of her new position. The Ministry of Magic required a balance of reputable and disreputable figures. The former would bolster Oz's prospects for advancement, while the latter's shortcomings could be attributed to umbrage. Following this decision, John met with Barty Sr. to finalize the appointments of the Defense Against the Dark Arts professor and the senior investigator at Hogwarts. He anticipated that Dumbledore would make concessions after August 8th, especially if it meant securing proper training for Harry. With the arrangements in place, John removed his mask and returned to Privet Drive, where he was greeted by Tom, who appeared unusually stern. Tom's tail wagged excitedly upon John's return, but John's attention was quickly drawn to the blood in Tom's mouth and a torn piece of fabric in the grass, a fragment of a wizard's robe. Recognizing the significance of the fabric, John's expression turned grave. He proceeded to the basement to examine the magical residue on the fabric. The results left him with a perplexed expression, hinting at a deeper mystery yet to be unraveled. At the table, Tom displayed extraordinary bravery, aggressively chasing and biting several wizards. Lupin was about to intervene when Tom issued a low growl of warning. It wasn't that the wizards were unwilling to use magic. One square-jawed wizard was about to cast a spell when he was abruptly stopped by Lupin and Moody. "Don't use magic on dogs," Moody barked, causing the wizard to pause momentarily. Tonks, a young witch, asked in confusion, "What's happening here?" Lupin dodged Tom's attempts to bite him and replied with a wry smile, "This is John Wick's dog. Sirius had an encounter with John before." He referred to a painful memory, noting that even now, Sirius occasionally rubbed his left rib where he had been injured. Regardless, no one should use magic on dogs. Moody, who walked with a limp and was the slowest among them, exclaimed as Tom bit down on his wooden leg. The force of the bite shattered the leg into several pieces, eliciting a surprised reaction from Moody. What kind of dog has such a powerful bite? He wondered aloud. Harry, who had not yet been bitten, used the disillusionment charm to become invisible. Tom, unable to see him but still able to smell him, was sweating profusely. Harry asked, "How do we get out of here?" "Leave the lawn. There's magic here that prevents flying," Lupin advised. After a chaotic escape, several wizards managed to roll and crawl away from the lawn. The square-jawed wizard, moving slowly, was bitten by Tom on the calf and screamed in pain. Lupin intervened, but the damage was done. The wizard's leg was soon dripping with blood. They hurried away without further delay. John watched the scene with amusement. "Legendary Auror and former Defense Against the Dark Arts professor, chased by your dog," he remarked, shaking his head and smiling. He examined Tom's teeth, which gleamed with a cold light, and said with satisfaction, "It seems the experiments during this period were not in vain. Your teeth are now compatible with those of a werewolf." Tom was no ordinary dog anymore. Since creating the horned snoring beast, John had been experimenting with enchanting animals. Despite the common belief that ordinary animals couldn't hold magic like magical creatures, John, a master alchemist, had modified Tom's teeth with magical biological materials. He succeeded in creating a magical container within Tom, which also produced a certain toxicity. The square-jawed wizard was fortunate. Had John enchanted Tom with a basilisk tooth later that night, the consequences could have been dire. Patting Tom on the head, John turned his attention back to the group of wizards. "Since Lupin and Moody are here, it's likely they're members of the Order of the Phoenix. Are you here to pick up Harry?" Knowing Harry had an invisibility cloak, John wasn't surprised by his absence. The presence of such a group indicated the Order of the Phoenix's high regard for Harry. "Order of the Phoenix, I hope I succeed," John muttered as he picked up a shard stained with the square-jawed wizard's blood. Holding the fragment in his right hand, he let his left hand hover a foot above it and whispered, "Blood trail." The blood on the shard condensed and floated, gradually forming an arrow in the air. A red silk thread stretched out into the void, nearing the arrow. Suddenly, John frowned as the blood seemed to be drained of magical power, evaporating into white smoke. "It's protected by magic," he realized. The owner of the blood was in a safe house, protected by spells. John had briefly discovered the location, but it was quickly obscured. The Fidelity Curse? He wondered, already suspecting the answer. He hadn't anticipated Dumbledore acting so swiftly to secure a base for the Order. John had hoped to uncover the Order's location for future plans, but realized his task was more complicated than he had thought. After navigating through various challenges, Harry finally reached his destination. To Harry's surprise, their destination was not the burrow. Moody explained that the burrow was too unsafe. Using a deluminator borrowed from Dumbledore, Moody extinguished all the surrounding lights. He firmly grasped Harry's arm, while Lupin and Tonks followed closely, carrying Harry's luggage. The rest of the group drew their wands, vigilantly guarding their flanks. With such a formidable escort, it seemed only Voldemort himself could pose a threat to Harry. "Here it is," Moody announced gruffly, handing Harry a piece of parchment. Harry examined it closely. The parchment bore long, thin handwriting that seemed vaguely familiar. It read, "Order of the Phoenix Headquarters is located at 12 Grimmauld Place, London." Harry, puzzled, began to ask, "What is a phoenix?" But Moody cut him off sharply. "Don't talk about it here," he snapped, his eyes scanning their surroundings for any sign of danger, particularly from a lurking Death Eater who might attempt to cast a fatal curse on Harry. Once he was satisfied that Harry had committed the address to memory, Moody promptly destroyed the parchment with a flick of his wand. Standing in front of number 11 Grimmauld Place, Harry was perplexed to see number 10 on one side and number 13 on the other, with no sign of number 12. "Think about what you just memorized," Lupin reminded him gently, his tone reminiscent of his days teaching at Hogwarts. As Harry focused on the address, the scene before him transformed. A dilapidated door materialized between numbers 11 and 13, its grimy walls and gloomy windows starkly out of place. It was as though the house had magically expanded, squeezing itself between its neighbors. Harry was astonished, but Moody quickly ushered him inside. The door's paint was chipped and scratched, and a serpent-shaped silver knocker adorned it, lacking both a keyhole and a letterbox. Lupin drew his wand and knocked, the sound echoing like a chain rattling. The door swung open, revealing Tonks, who exclaimed, "God, Podmore, stop screaming, we're almost exposed." Her words drew everyone's attention to Sturgis Podmore, who was pale and trembling, a moan escaping his lips. "I'm sorry, I can't stop the bleeding," he gasped. Upon closer inspection, Lupin's expression turned grave. "This is magical in nature. It cannot be healed by ordinary means." Harry was confused. Podmore had merely been bitten by a dog, or so it seemed. Yet Lupin, with his extensive knowledge of defense against the dark arts, recognized the severity of the curse, one that prevented the wound from healing and caused unending bleeding. Moody concurred with a grim nod. Black magic. They quickly assisted Podmore inside, taking care to clean the blood from the doorstep. Podmore's screams soon filled the house, drawing the attention of its other occupants. Unbeknownst to them, a car was parked nearby in Grimmauld Place. Watson, its occupant, watched in awe as a group of people descended from the sky on broomsticks and vanished into the house, his mouth agape at the sight. Chapter 269, The Lively Order of the Phoenix and Watson's Great Adventure. Upon entering number 12 Grimmauld Place, the cacophony of urgent voices was immediately overwhelming. Hermione and Ron, drawn by the commotion, witnessed a distressing sight. Sturgis Podmore with his legs severely injured, blood soaking through his trousers. The Weasley family was present in full force, with the exception of Percy. Mrs. Weasley, deeming the scene too gruesome for her youngest, ushered Ginny back to her room, though Ginny shot Ron a look that clearly questioned his exemption from such protection. What happened to him? The urgency in the room escalated as more members of the meeting emerged, drawn by the commotion. Sirius, seeking answers, turned to his old friend Lupin, who offered a wry smile in return. He was bitten by a dog. Dog? Sirius echoed, incredulous. The severity of the wound seemed beyond the capability of any ordinary dog, even a Tibetan Mastiff. Snape, with a frown etched deeply on his face, knelt beside the injured man. Examining the wound, which was deep enough to expose bone, he announced gravely, "There's a powerful curse at work here, preventing the wound from healing." A pale-faced Podmore, trembling, managed to ask, "Will I be able to keep my leg?" "If we can find the dog that bit you, there might be a way to counteract the curse," Snape replied, though his tone suggested he was far from optimistic. Despite his expertise in dark magic, even creating spells like the Shenfeng Wuying, he admitted to being at a loss for a cure. "The dog? Remus, which dog did this?" Sirius pressed, seeking clarity. It was Harry who provided the answer, his voice cutting through the tense atmosphere. "It's Tom, John's dog." The room fell into a stunned silence, Hermione covering her mouth in disbelief. The idea that such a small creature could inflict such damage was shocking. Snape's response was icy. "What foolishness have you engaged in?" Harry bristled at the accusation, but Sirius quickly defended his godson. "Severus, he's not the type to act foolishly." "Really?" Snape's tone was laden with sarcasm. "Since when is John Wick known for impulsiveness? It seems more likely that someone provoked him." The mention of John Wick caused Sirius a twinge of discomfort, a reminder of past grievances. Lupin interjected, offering a weary smile. "This time it wasn't about provoking John. We inadvertently trespassed on his property." "So, a group of wizards was chased off by a dog?" Snape's cold remark underscored the embarrassment of their situation. "As humiliating as it is, yes," Lupin admitted. The conversation was cut short by Moody, who, tapping his crutch impatiently, emphasized the urgency of their situation. "We're on the brink of war, and we're already down a man." Bill Weasley, a curse-breaker with extensive knowledge of curses, examined Podmore's wound and grimly concurred with Snape. "The poison is often its own antidote. The best course of action would be to create a potion from the dog's tooth to counteract the curse." Snape's earlier suggestion was met with a sharp retort from Hermione. No, John would never allow it. John Wick's reputation as a formidable protector of his dog was well known. Anyone daring to harm his pet would face severe repercussions. Hermione turned to Sirius, seeking his intervention. "You and Tom are friends, right?" Sirius, caught in a difficult position, reflected on his bond with Tom. Initially, their friendship had been a source of comfort, but now the thought of betraying that trust was unbearable. "I'm afraid extracting Tom's tooth is not an option. We can't risk angering John Wick." This revelation left some members of the Order puzzled, unfamiliar with the extent of John Wick's influence. "That's just a student, John Wick," Daedalus Diggle remarked, unable to grasp the gravity of the situation. "He's not just any student," someone corrected, hinting at the depth of John Wick's capabilities and the lengths he would go to protect his dog. The room fell into contemplative silence, the weight of their predicament settling heavily on their shoulders. Snape remarked with a peculiar tone, "He is a genius, a wizard of formidable magical prowess." Daedalus Diggle was puzzled about what made this particular student so extraordinary. Lupin interjected, "We can't resort to attacking, Bill. Is there a way to provide some immediate relief? Dumbledore will surely have a solution." "I can alleviate his pain for the time being," Bill offered, drawing his wand. With a flick and a whisper, the excruciating pain in Podmore's calf subsided significantly. His complexion remained pale, but the relief was evident. Snape's mood darkened as the meeting's disruption lingered, his displeasure clear. Ron, still shaken, turned to Hermione with concern. "It won't hold a grudge, right? I mean, about me kicking Crookshanks." He was referring to Tom's intelligent cat, Crookshanks, known for his cunning. "Crookshanks wouldn't let Tom attack him, would he?" Hermione shot him a look of disbelief, exasperated by his naivety. As the adults prepared to resume their meeting and Bill began to tend to Podmore's wound, Mrs. Weasley ushered the children back to their rooms, deeming the upcoming discussions unsuitable for their ears. Just as Harry was about to ascend the stairs, filled with questions, the scarred door swung open, revealing a breathless Tonks. "No, there are muggles," she announced, panting. Moody, visibly irritated by the day's events, barked, "Then drive him away with the obliviate charm." Tonks grimaced. "I couldn't. The muggle sped away too quickly." "You didn't use the obliviate charm on him?" Moody asked, surprised, as he moved briskly towards her. "I tried," Tonks retorted, clutching her right hand in frustration. "But he slammed my hand in the car door and threw my wand away." Harry paused on the stairs, the gravity of the situation sinking in. "Today is just not our day," Sirius exclaimed, adjusting his collar in frustration before declaring his intent to pursue the muggle. Transforming into a large black dog, he dashed out in pursuit. Snape commented dryly, "It seems today's meeting is not meant to be." The three young friends exchanged looks on the stairs, overwhelmed by the day's unexpected events. Watson, reflecting on the incident, was still in disbelief. He had merely come to survey the land, contemplating the construction of a hotel as a new venture. intending to use investors' money for legitimate purposes. Everything was proceeding smoothly until he witnessed a group of people descending on broomsticks, a sight straight out of a fairy tale. As a wizard's father, he was startled but remained silent, sitting in his car without the lights on. After the wizards vanished, he prepared to leave, only to be confronted by a witch as he started his car. Recognizing the wand in her hand as similar to his son's, his heart raced. Feigning ignorance, he watched as the witch apologized and pointed the wand at herself. In a moment of panic, Watson recalled the tricks his son, Andre, had taught him. With swift action, he opened the car door, knocking the witch's hand aside, and snatched the wand. Understanding that most wizards are powerless without their wands, Watson abandoned all pretense of civility. He trapped the witch's hand in the car door, forcing her to release the wand, then pushed her away, jumped into his car, and sped off. As he drove, he tossed the wand into the grass, exhilarated by the encounter. "Thrilling, absolutely thrilling," Watson exclaimed, unable to contain his excitement even after escaping. Glancing in the rearview mirror, he navigated the intersection, his mind racing with the day's extraordinary events. Watson halted, a thought crossing his mind that perhaps it was time to discard the object in question. He contemplated whether to inform his son of his remarkable accomplishments as a father. Suddenly, out of the corner of his eye, he noticed a large black dog, setting off alarm bells in his head. Watson's instincts screamed that something was amiss. The dog, instead of retreating, charged straight towards him. With no time to ponder, Watson slammed on the accelerator. The car's rear emitted a plume of black smoke as a red light narrowly missed the spot where the dog had been moments before. In an instant, the dog transformed into a human form and apparated directly in front of the car with a loud bang. The sudden appearance of the black-haired man caused Watson to yank the handbrake in shock. The car skidded, drawing a graceful arc, and its tail end collided with the man, sending him flying. Watson's heart raced as he pondered whether he had accidentally killed the man. After a brief moment of hesitation, Watson retrieved a pistol from the glove compartment. He cautiously exited the car and approached the man. Could he be dead? Watson mused, considering the various outcomes. Resolute, he thought, if I've started this, I must see it through, even if it means disposing of the body in the sea. He lamented his misfortune at stumbling upon such a predicament. As Watson turned the man over, he was met with a wand pointed directly at him. "Damn," he cursed, just as a flash of white light and the sound of an empty magazine filled the air. The gunfire ceased. Confusion marred Watson's face, and the black-haired man, equally disoriented, struggled to his feet, revealing gunshot wounds on his arms and legs. Blood oozed from the wounds, but for a wizard, such injuries were manageable. "Damn, I was nearly killed by a muggle," Sirius muttered under his breath as he attempted to drag his injured body away. "Ah, look who we have here," a mocking voice called out. Sirius' expression turned grave as he turned to face the source. Emerging from the shadows of the empty street, a man in an oversized trench coat and cowboy hat eyed Sirius warily. Stepping forward, the man crossed his arms and said teasingly, "Sirius Black." Sirius' face paled, Oxer the Index Finger. Chapter 270, Gringotts and the Blood of Lestrange. When Sirius was still a fugitive, his interactions with Oxer, known as the Index Finger, were frequent. Oxer, a former bounty hunter with a reputation for his relentless pursuit of Sirius due to the hefty bounty on his head, encountered Sirius once again. "Look at you, Sirius Black, noble and ever pure," Oxer teased, his face twisting into a mocking smile. "Why do you look like a lost dog? Are you wanted again?" "Oxer, what brings you here?" Sirius asked, his tone wary. He couldn't help but feel unlucky, especially given his current vulnerable state. Oxer, noticing Sirius's caution, shrugged nonchalantly, tipped his hat with a finger, and revealed with a sly grin, "Don't worry, I've switched professions. I'm now hunting Death Eaters." He casually flashed a silver sickle hidden in his windbreaker. Sirius's eyes narrowed. He remembered the bounty posted in the Blind Pig Bar for the Star Apostle, a hunter specializing in Death Eaters. In theory, these individuals should have been allies to the Order of the Phoenix. However, the Order didn't see it that way, given that these so-called Star Apostles were dark wizards themselves, each with a notorious past. The Index Finger, the Twin Stars, the Execution Platform. These names were infamous, their bearers deemed more dangerous than the Death Eaters themselves, particularly the Index Finger, who relished in the act of killing. "What? Interested in joining?" Oxer offered with a smirk. "I could introduce you." "No," Sirius responded icily. "I have no interest in associating with someone like you." "Even though you're a wanted criminal yourself?" Oxer retorted with disdain. "Don't pretend you're above it all. You've taken lives before." Turning his attention to Watson, Oxer asked casually, "Planning to kill him?" "It was merely a memory charm," Sirius clarified. If he had intended to kill Watson, the situation wouldn't have ended with mere injuries. "Good luck, then," Oxer shrugged, inadvertently dropping a piece of human skin from his pocket. He picked it up, dusted it off without a hint of discomfort, and left. Sirius watched him go, a sense of relief washing over him only after Oxer was out of sight. Turning to cast the Obliviate Charm, Sirius caught sight of the departing car and its taillights, cursing under his breath. At 12 Grimmauld Place, Harry, Ron, and Hermione were finally reunited in a dimly lit room with 2 single beds. The day's events had been overwhelming, leaving the trio struggling to process everything. "So, you were attacked by a Dementor?" Ron broke the silence, his curiosity about Harry's encounter evident. Hermione, visibly upset, interjected, "Harry is the victim here, yet he's the one facing a trial at the Ministry of Magic. It's unjust. According to the Reasonable Restraint on Underage Wizards Act, Harry was within his rights to use magic in a life-threatening situation." Her rapid explanation was met with an understanding glance between Ron and Harry, a silent acknowledgement of Hermione's unwavering support. Noticing Hedwig in the room, Ron mentioned, "She's been restless, nearly pecking us to death." Harry felt a twinge of guilt, remembering how he had instructed Hedwig to ensure Ron sent a satisfactory reply. "I'm really sorry. I just needed some answers, you know," he admitted, reflecting on the isolation he had felt. "We wanted to write back, mate," Ron assured him. "Hermione was especially worried. She kept saying you might do something rash if you didn't hear from us. But Dumbledore had us promise not to tell you anything," he explained, hinting at the complexity of their situation and the difficult decisions they had to make in order to protect Harry. The initial excitement of reuniting with his 2 best friends had gradually faded for Harry. After a month of eagerly anticipating their arrival, he found himself willing to let them go, preferring solitude. "He seems to think that's the best thing to do," Hermione said, her voice tinged with nervousness. She was referring to Dumbledore. "I think he believes you're safest with Muggles," Ron added. "Really?" Harry questioned, skepticism raising his eyebrows. "Has any of you been attacked by Dementors this summer?" The notion of being safest around Muggles seemed ironic to him, especially after his own encounter with a Dementor, alone and in the dark. Ron struggled to find the right words. "No, but that's exactly why he had members of the Order of the Phoenix keep an eye on you at all times." "It doesn't seem to be very effective, does it?" Harry remarked, a chill running through his heart as he strove for calm. "I still ended up having to defend myself, didn't I?" "Perhaps there's another reason," Hermione suggested after a pause. "He thinks John is there too." John, the name that had been frequently mentioned earlier, suddenly resurfaced. Harry couldn't help but laugh bitterly. "Can John keep me safe? At least John is more reliable than some." Hermione replied hesitantly, "John wouldn't hurt you." "You don't understand. During the summer vacation," Harry stopped mid-sentence, recalling something. The black silk thread that seemed capable of pulling away one's soul. If Hermione was right, then was that John's magic? Harry was certain of one thing. It was a dark and unsettling magic. Could John be dabbling in dark arts? Ron quickly tried to diffuse the tension. "Dumbledore has his reasons. We saw how angry he was with Mundungus for his behavior." "I'd rather he just left," Harry said dryly. "If he doesn't, I'm stuck here, unable to use magic, and Dumbledore will probably keep me at Privet Drive all summer." Harry was frustrated with Dumbledore's decision to isolate him from the wizarding world. As they continued their conversation, Sirius returned, causing a stir downstairs. Tonks nearly burst into laughter at one point. "What's with Muggles?" she gloated, while Sirius looked on grimly. The idea of a Muggle stepping out of line, especially with a gun, was unheard of. This wasn't America, after all. The next day, Watson returned home very late. John couldn't help but wonder if his father had been involved in a drunk driving incident, noticing a dent in the rear of the car. "Dad, did you crash?" he asked. Watson, appearing distracted, asked, "Is there any way to counteract a wizard's magic?" John was puzzled by the sudden question. "Well, you could just grab the wizard's wand." "No, that's not what I mean," Watson clarified. "I'm asking if there's a way to resist a wizard's magic." He had managed to escape an encounter with a wizard the previous day, emptying his gun's magazine and injuring Sirius in the process. The thought of magic being so dangerous and having no means to defend against it as a muggle seemed profoundly unfair. John, sensing his father's genuine concern, cautiously revealed the existence of magical amulets capable of blocking most spells. Watson's interest was piqued, realizing that wizards weren't just benign figures capable of whimsical transformations. Peeking into the basement, Watson discovered it was stocked with enough amulets to arm a small team. John, realizing his father's inquiry wasn't without reason, began to worry about the safety of his family, considering the wizards they might encounter. Meanwhile, in Diagon Alley, a young man claiming to be the last of the Lestranges made an appearance at Gringotts, stirring curiosity and concern among the wizarding community. The goblin scrutinized the authorization document in his hand, then shifted his gaze to the youthful face before him, harboring deep skepticism. "This is legitimate, correct?" the young man inquired with a slight smile, pulling out his pocket watch and adding, "Time is money, after all." Despite his reservations, the goblin found the contract to be authentic and was thus compelled to comply. He led the young man to the Lestrange family vault. As they journeyed, they encountered a waterfall known for its ability to erase magical enchantments. The goblin kept a watchful eye on the young man, expecting some reaction, but remarkably, he remained unaffected by the waterfall's magic cleansing properties. Their path eventually led them to a railcar, which took them directly to the Lestrange vault. Upon arrival, they were greeted by the sight of a fire dragon, its body bound by chains. The goblin, with a practiced hand, shook a small jingling tablet, prompting the dragon to refrain from launching an attack. This display caused the young man, whose name was John, to narrow his eyes thoughtfully. They moved past the dragon and into the vault itself. Compared to the others they had passed, this one was markedly more secure. The goblin's finger traced the door's mechanism, unlocking it with a click, and the vault door swung open. Inside, treasures of the ancient pureblood family were arrayed in a stunning collection, each piece more dazzling than the last. "These alone justify the reputation of the Silver Hand series," John mused. The goblin, standing obsequiously behind, awaited further instructions. John glanced at him and said dismissively, "You may leave now." The goblin hesitated, muttered under his breath, and departed. John's attention returned to the vault's contents. He adjusted his meticulously styled hair and focused on a shelf that held a sword adorned with rubies. His expression turned contemplative. "The sword of Gryffindor?" he mused aloud. After a moment, he shook his head, dismissing the thought. "It's a fake, but it appears to be quite valuable." John had taken precautions against the waterfall's magic erasing effects by employing a makeup artist to subtly alter his appearance. Though his face remained the same, these minor adjustments lent him an entirely different aura. Surveying the treasure-filled vault, John allowed himself a satisfied grin. All of this is now mine. This moment marked the beginning of an audacious adventure for John, one that would intertwine his fate with the magical world in ways he had yet to imagine. Chapter 271, The Gold Cup and the Horcrux. Upon entering the Lestrange vault, John was cautious not to provoke the goblin guarding it. He knew better than to touch the treasures carelessly, aware that ancient families often protected their valuables with curses or magical traps. With a flick of his wrist, a silver ring expanded to cover his entire arm, providing him with some protection. He carefully picked up a silver cup, examining it closely. "It's enchanted," he noted, "and will trigger as soon as it's touched." His foresight had served him well. His eyes shifted, pupils becoming vertical slits, allowing him to see the magic laced within the object. A fire curse and a duplication curse, he identified. With a precise movement, he tapped the cup with his bent index finger, neutralizing the magic as if deflating a balloon. He set the now harmless silver cup aside and delved deeper into the vault. The Lestrange family, much like magpies, had amassed a collection of shiny objects: gold chains, silver cups, crystals, and various magical animal furs and horns. To John, these treasures seemed mundane, and he moved through the vault as if it were his own personal storeroom. He paused in front of a set of goblin-made armor, shiny and imposing. "This looks like it was made for trolls, but it might just fit Hagrid," he mused, touching his chin thoughtfully. With a simple brush of his silver hand, the enchantments on the armor dissipated. He decided it would make a fine gift for Hagrid, imagining the half-giant as a formidable, mobile fortress clad in the armor. Next, he examined a sword that was a poor imitation of Gryffindor's. Crafted by fairies, but lacking in detail and the distinctive sharpness of Gryffindor's sword, he critiqued. A flick of his fingers confirmed its dullness compared to the real artifact. Still, made of mithril and studded with precious stones, it could fetch over 5,000 galleons. With a satisfied smile, he added the sword to his bag. As he continued his exploration, John discovered several ancient magical items, testament to the craftsmanship of generations past. His attention was then captured by a small, exquisitely made gold cup, distinct from the others. It bore the mark of Hufflepuff. A relic of Hufflepuff? He pondered, intrigued. He inspected the cup closely, searching for any enchantments. To his surprise, he found none. Instead, a more sinister realization dawned on him. "A Horcrux?" he whispered, his expression turning grave. The discovery was unexpected but significant. "Hufflepuff's cup. Voldemort, your ambition knows no bounds," John mused, recalling the relics of Hogwarts founders he had read about. Voldemort had dared to use these sacred items as vessels for his Horcruxes, with the locket and Ravenclaw's diadem likely among them, he concluded. As he pondered this, a low hiss in Parseltongue reached his ears, an attempt by the Horcrux to influence him. John merely glanced at the cup before securely placing it in his pocket. He then proceeded to methodically empty the vault of its valuables, sparing only the worthless or uninteresting items. "I have an idea," John said, a mischievous gleam in his eye as he surveyed the half-emptied vault. He summoned the goblin, who was shocked at the sight of the depleted treasury. "Why did you take so much?" the goblin exclaimed in dismay. "What? I'm merely claiming what belongs to my family," John retorted, his tone leaving no room for argument. John's gaze was icy as he stared down the goblin, his presence alone exerting a palpable sense of intimidation. Goblins, known for their avarice, were not favored by many in the business realm. After ensuring the goblin secured the vault door, John and his companion exited Gringotts. Before leaving, John turned to the goblin, curiosity briefly replacing his cold demeanor. "I forgot to ask, what's your name?" "Griphook, Mr. Lestrange," the goblin replied, watching as the man, who claimed lineage from the Lestrange family, departed. Removing his mask, John replaced it with a silver one, contemplating the day's fruitful endeavors. Given the Lestrange family's unexpected generosity, he felt inclined to reciprocate. "Prepare the necessary materials and find some alchemists skilled in crafting explosives, yet not overly demanding," John instructed with a sly grin, imagining the Lestrange family's reaction to a room filled with volatile Garen. Tang Mi, aware of John's secretive plans, refrained from prying. "Have George and Fred settled on a location?" he inquired, referring to the Weasley twins' venture into opening a joke shop, as noted in the report from Silver Hand Angel Investment. "Have someone thoroughly investigate the location. Despite their creative minds, their naivety, as seen with Ludo at the World Cup, raises concerns," John remarked, recalling how the twins were easily deceived. While he admired their spirit, he was not in the business of charity. Silver Hand Angel Investment employed a dedicated team to assess potential investments, ensuring a thorough evaluation of location and product popularity. Shifting topics, John inquired about Mundungus Fletcher's debt repayment. Tang Mi confirmed that Mundungus had yet to settle his debt, opting instead to involve others in a scheme to steal cauldrons. Disdainfully, John remarked, "He has until tomorrow. If he fails to deliver, he'll find alternative means to repay us. Escaping is futile. I'll find him." Mundungus, having spent time under the guise of a member of Johnny Silver Hands, had managed to alienate nearly everyone, leaving him without allies or financial support. As the day waned, John returned home, spellbook in hand, only to find an unusual gathering. Men, seemingly casual yet armed, blocked his path. A tall man attempted to intercept him, but was quickly halted by another, who addressed John with respect. "Master Wick?" the long-haired man greeted, signaling his companions to stand down, wary of alarming John. "Subordinates," John mused, puzzled by his father's decision to involve such individuals. Inside, John overheard his parents in a heated discussion. His father, attempting to justify the presence of the armed men, expressed concern over a wizard intent on harming their family. The revelation of a potential threat ignited a cold fury in John. "Who is this wizard? Why is he targeting us, and where can he be found?" John demanded, his voice icy, cutting through the tension in the room. His parents, caught in their argument, froze at his questions. A flicker of fear passed through Mrs. Wick's eyes as Watson turned to face his son, the atmosphere charged with a mix of concern and determination. John's gaze was stormy as he pressed for an answer. "Tell me," he demanded. Watson, feeling the weight of his son's question, replied with a hint of resignation, "I don't feel like a father at all." The topic shifted to Grimmauld Place, and understanding the situation, John took a deep breath to compose himself. Watson had inadvertently witnessed a wizard casting a spell, and as a result, became a target of the forgetting curse. John was relieved to learn it wasn't a vendetta, but was still concerned. "What was the wizard's name?" John inquired, piecing together information from the story. "Watson is a real car god." It appeared the wizard was part of some organized activity, and Watson had previously heard his name. After a moment of thought, Watson answered, "If I recall correctly, the wizard mentioned his name was Sirius Black." John was taken aback. The name Sirius Black stirred a mix of confusion and curiosity within him, hinting at a deeper mystery, yet to be unraveled. Chapter 272. Constructing a stadium and encountering Sirius Black. Was this Sirius Black exactly who John had been thinking about? Not long ago, he had been pondering over how to locate the headquarters of the Order of the Phoenix. Could this surprise encounter be a stroke of luck? As Harry's godfather, Sirius undoubtedly had ties to the Order of the Phoenix. The fact that Sirius personally pursued this matter suggested its significance, likely pointing to the Order's base. John wondered how his father had managed to escape from an adult wizard with extensive combat experience. "There's another person involved," he learned. According to the dark-haired wizard, it seems to be Oxel the Index Finger. "Are you certain?" John asked, his expression one of disbelief. It seemed like a mere coincidence that Oxel the Index Finger, after pursuing Death Eaters, happened to encounter Sirius and had his memory erased. "I need to increase Oxel's compensation when I return," John decided, filled with admiration for the young man's bravery. Turning to his father, John proposed earnestly, "Dad, I remember you enjoy Quidditch. How about I build you a stadium?" Watson was taken aback by the suggestion. Having learned from the Quidditch book John brought back that a Quidditch stadium was far larger than their lawn, he asked in astonishment, "Is this wizard incredibly powerful, or am I nearing my end?" John couldn't help but admire his father's imagination. He personally escorted Watson to the basement, where Watson emerged with 3 peculiar wands in his pocket, one that conjured a screaming chicken, another a rabbit, and the third a rubber boat. Around his waist, he wore a belt adorned with amulets that jingled with each step. A silver hand pendant, a new novelty item that could hang people from the ceiling as if dead, though harmlessly, dangled from his neck. Clutching the golden snitch, he released it, watching it circle him twice before returning to his grasp. Additionally, he donned a red wizard hat adorned with a lion that could emit flames. With heavy steps, Watson approached his wife and collapsed into her arms, the tall man letting out a scream. "I might be cursed, and I could die tomorrow." Mrs. Wick was at a loss for words, unable to believe her son would celebrate his father's potential demise. She consoled Watson. "It's all right. John just learned of your fondness for these things." Watson, still concerned, mentioned, "But he also promised a set of wizard chess as tall as a man." Mrs. Wick reassured him, "I'll inquire if your curse is serious." After further discussion, Mrs. Wick confirmed that her husband was merely overwhelmed, much to her relief. Upon hearing he was fine, Watson eagerly inquired about customizing the wizard chess set, envisioning it in gold, with the king modeled after himself. Meanwhile, at the Order of the Phoenix headquarters, Sirius had been injured for the first time. If not for the wizard's superior resilience, the situation could have been dire. A healing spell quickly mended Sirius's wounds. Lupin inquired, "What did you mention about the Star Disciples?" Snape's expression darkened, suspecting the Star Apprentice might be an ally of Johnny Silverhand. Having been defeated by Silverhand previously, Snape was eager to uncover the Star Apprentice's intentions. Before Sirius could respond, Mrs. Weasley's voice thundered, "Get upstairs!" The youngsters, having been eavesdropping, were promptly sent away. The meeting then continued in earnest, with most members present except Dumbledore. The Star Apprentice was spotted near Grimmauld Place. It was Oxel the Index Finger, and he seemed to be hunting, Sirius reported gravely. "I noticed a piece of human skin shedding from him, indicating the Death Eater's proximity." This revelation cast a somber mood over the gathering, as the presence of either Star Apprentices or Death Eaters nearby posed a significant threat. Grimmauld Place was abuzz with concern. "We need more help, Arthur," Moody stated, casting a glance at Mr. Weasley. Mr. Astley removed his glasses, cleaned them with a flannel cloth, and sighed deeply before putting them back on. "Percy refuses to join the Order of the Phoenix," he revealed. Sirius, surprised, raised his eyebrows. "Is it because of your promotion?" "No, it's because he's aligned himself with another group," Mr. Weasley replied, a tone of resignation in his voice. "The Star Club." Moody frowned at the mention. "That's hardly a laughing matter," Kingsley added in his deep voice. "From what I understand, the Star Club was initially formed by students." "Yes," Bill chimed in, "but that doesn't detract from their capabilities. Besides Percy, there's another talented witch, Fleur. I've witnessed her skills firsthand." Mr. Weasley looked troubled. "Most of the Star Club's members are indeed students, but Percy believes they will make a significant mark on the wizarding world eventually." His disappointment was palpable. Percy's joining the Ministry of Magic as a director could have been a significant boon for the Order of the Phoenix. Instead, Percy's allegiance to the Star Club and his disdain for the Order of the Phoenix had caused Mr. Weasley considerable distress, to the point of breaking objects in frustration. The future of the wizarding world was at stake, not a mere child's play. The majority dismissed the Star Club as inconsequential, considering themselves elite members of the magical community. However, 3 individuals thought differently. Snape's eyes gleamed with understanding. He alone grasped the formidable nature of John Wick. From defeating a giant monster in his first year, slaying a basilisk in his second, capturing Sirius in his third, to splitting a lake with a sword in his fourth, John Wick's accomplishments were unparalleled. Exceptional individuals indeed attract others of their caliber, and the Star Club was a gathering of such geniuses. Lupin pondered the possibility of John being a follower of Johnny Silverhand, while Sirius felt a pang in his left rib, a reminder of past pains. The conversation shifted towards the dangers posed by both the Star Club and the Death Eaters. Regardless of which group the Order of the Phoenix encountered, trouble was inevitable. "Don't worry, we have the Fidelius charm in place, and Dumbledore is our secret keeper." "No one can breach our security," Tonks interjected, hoping to lighten the mood. Her words momentarily eased the tension in the room. Surely, they were safe here, weren't they? Sirius couldn't shake off the feeling that something significant was looming, especially after recalling the Muggle who had managed to escape. His right eyelid twitched uncontrollably. The Order of the Phoenix's headquarters at Grimmauld Place was in dire need of a cleanup. Despite Sirius having returned and lived there for a year, he had neglected its upkeep, harboring a deep-seated loathing for his family home. Thus, he had willingly offered it to the Order as their base. Wang wang, the sound of a dog barking echoed, accompanied by the harsh curses from the portrait of Sirius's detestable mother. Harry and Hermione attempted to restrain Podmore, who, disguised as a dog, was about to urinate on the stairs. "He's been like this since morning. We don't know what's wrong," Harry explained, struggling to contain his disgust. Bill approached to assess the situation and said gravely, "His curse has intensified. It's a canine curse. He's gradually becoming more dog-like." "I've never heard of anyone turning into a dog." "Sirius, no offense," Harry quickly added, noticing Sirius's stern gaze. He had momentarily forgotten that his godfather could transform into a dog at will. Despite Bill's efforts to reverse the spell, they were unsuccessful. Podmore, despairing, asked, "Am I going to become a dog man akin to a werewolf?" He scratched his neck with his foot, nearly injuring himself due to his lack of flexibility. The trio shivered at the thought, and Hermione whispered, "Only John can solve this." At her suggestion, all eyes turned to her. Bill hesitated before speaking. "Old you ask John Wick for help? We can't just stand by and watch him turn into a dog." In the room, Hermione and John were the only ones who shared a friendship. Biting her lip, she nodded, acknowledging the gravity of the situation and the need for John's unique expertise. Harry said, "I'm not sure if John will be willing to help us. You know how he detests being slighted." He looked somewhat embarrassed, realizing that his actions might have inadvertently alienated John. Despite this, they pinned their hopes on Hermione. She had penned a letter and borrowed Ron's owl, Pigwidgeon, to deliver it. The small owl took flight from Grimmauld Place, aiming to bridge the gap between them and John. Chapter 273, Entering the Door and Destroying the Painting. Upon apparating to Grimmauld Place, John ran his fingers through his hair, which had fallen into his eyes. "Maybe it's time for a haircut," he mused, considering the discomfort caused by his overgrown black hair that now reached his eyes. Grimmauld Place, nestled in the heart of London, was lined with old residential buildings. Their walls, mottled with age, bore the heavy marks of time. As he walked, John paused outside number 11, reflecting on the effectiveness of the Fidelius charm. "It's indeed a powerful spell," he thought, appreciating how it concealed the Order of the Phoenix's headquarters from prying eyes. Lost in thought, he was startled by an owl that suddenly appeared, circling twice before heading straight for him. "Hermione?" he wondered, reaching out to receive the letter it carried. Upon reading the letter, which indeed was from Hermione, John felt a mix of confusion and concern. It detailed an urgent situation involving someone bitten by Tom Riddle, now suffering from a magical affliction akin to rabies, and requested John's assistance. It must be the wizard bitten that day, John realized, a knowing smile crossing his face. The timing of this letter couldn't be more perfect. With a sense of purpose, John performed a spell, using a drop of blood from the owl, now trying to escape his grasp. A black silk thread emanated from his fingertip, wrapping around the owl, which fluttered in distress. Utilizing the owl's unique ability to locate individuals and the connection established through the letter, John focused, whispering an address to himself, 12 Grimmauld Place. As he opened his eyes, a dark arc of light flashed through them, and the hidden house between numbers 11 and 13 materialized before him, complete with dark doors and serpentine knockers. Releasing the owl, which flew towards the house in a panic, John approached the door. The letter in his hand burst into flames just as he rang the bell, a sound that echoed ominously through the air. After a brief wait, the door cracked open, revealing a young, red-haired witch who immediately cautioned against using the doorbell. Her warning was cut short as she caught sight of John. "Who are you?" Tonks asked, taken aback. "I think you should let me in first," John replied with a smile, stepping past her into the house just as the letter turned to ash. Inside, the sound of the doorbell had already stirred commotion. "Tonks, what idiot is using the doorbell?" Sirius's voice boomed from the meeting room, frustrated at the disturbance which had awakened the portrait of his mother. As Sirius emerged, his anger momentarily paused upon seeing John. "John Wick?" he asked, his tone a mix of surprise and suspicion, causing the chatter in the meeting room to fall silent. Meanwhile, the little owl, having completed its mission, returned to Ron, perching on his shoulder and seemingly recounting its adventure. "Little pig, why did you come back so quickly?" Ron asked, surprised by the owl's swift return. Hermione, equally puzzled, looked on, wondering what had transpired. "Send my letter to John." As soon as John's name was mentioned, the little pig stretched out its feet, seemingly accusing John of his misdeeds. Suddenly, Sirius's voice filled the room. Harry hesitated, wondering, "Did I mishear?" Ron wore a similar expression of confusion. Hermione, however, screamed in surprise, "It's John!" "But there's a Fidelius charm protecting this place. It should be impossible for him to find us," Harry muttered to himself, puzzled. Despite their confusion, Hermione had already dashed outside, with Harry and Ron having no choice but to follow. The piglet, feeling ignored, flew around the room in a huff. As they passed the wall adorned with house elf heads, they spotted the figure standing on the porch, John Wick. Sirius's face fell as he realized the gravity of the situation. "Did someone disclose the address to you?" he asked, concern evident in his voice. "The secret keeper here is Dumbledore. Could he have told John?" "Sirius, it's been a while," John greeted with a smile. "Do you recall chasing a muggle?" Sirius, taken aback, remembered the muggle they hadn't managed to catch. "How do you know about that?" he asked, surprised. John's smile vanished, replaced by a cold demeanor. "My father has suffered greatly because of you," he stated, causing Sirius's complexion to pale. Suddenly, John raised his left hand, and Sirius was sent flying backward by a powerful force. The pattern on John's shoe glowed, and with a gesture of his right hand, the silver Wick sword materialized. His movements were so swift that even Tonks, who was nearby, failed to react in time. "Stop!" A loud shout echoed, and John, without looking, knew he was now facing at least 3 wands. The sharp blade had already grazed Sirius's cheek and embedded itself into the wall. John looked up, a hint of mockery in his eyes. "Professor, I didn't expect to see you here," he said, acknowledging the group that had emerged from the conference room, including Moody, Lupin, Snape, Mr. Weasley, and a dark-skinned wizard in purple robes. Snape, wand still lowered, asked in a deep voice, "John, what brings you here?" "Unfortunately," John began, stepping on Sirius's left rib with a shrug, "my father was attacked by 2 wizards from this place not long ago. I've been trying to figure out who was bold enough to do it." "That escaped Muggle is your father?" Snape asked, visibly surprised. They had indeed been seen by a Muggle that day. Tonks, busy cleaning up the blood, was unaware of Watson Wick's identity. Sirius, too, should have recognized him, but had been preoccupied with his godson during Harry's 3rd year and hadn't made the connection. "This is quite embarrassing," Snape admitted, unsure of how to proceed. John's father had nearly been obliviated, making John's anger understandable. Lupin interjected, "We're sorry. We had no idea that was your father." "My father was so terrified he didn't dare to leave the house for days, convinced he was cursed and close to death," John said, his tone casual yet laced with underlying threat as the silver Wick sword gleamed menacingly. "This isn't something a simple apology can fix," John stated, his gaze sharp and dangerous. Sirius, indignant, retorted, "I was the one injured, yet your father shot me." "Oh," John sneered, "I'm truly sorry for that." "Look, John Wick, we're all on the same side here," Moody interjected gruffly. "Your presence here means Dumbledore trusts you. Did he invite you to treat Podmore's condition?" John looked perplexed. "That's not exactly the case," he admitted. He hadn't received an invitation from Dumbledore, but had followed clues in Hermione's inadvertently helpful letter to find his way here. Just then, Hermione appeared downstairs, shocked to see John with his foot on Sirius. Harry was about to intervene, but Ron held him back, warning, "Calm down. Look at what he's holding. You don't want to mess with that." Ron was visibly anxious, aware of John's formidable reputation. "I'm okay, Harry," Sirius managed to shout, inadvertently waking the portrait of his mother, who began hurling insults at the scene unfolding before her. John stood in the dimly lit corridor, his expression darkening as the portrait before him spat out, "In, filthy, lowly mudblood." The disdain and malice dripping from the painting's voice had become all too familiar to everyone present. They had all, at one point or another, been subjected to the portrait's vicious tirades. Frowning deeply, John turned his attention to the offensive painting, his hand moving almost instinctively towards his wand. He was about to perform a spell to capture the object when Sirius interjected, "It's useless. That thing is secured with a permanent adhesive spell." John spared Sirius a brief glance, his expression unreadable. Before Sirius could offer any further advice, John swiftly drew his wand and, with a flick of his wrist, cast the shattering charm. A brilliant white light erupted from the tip of his wand, striking the chattering portrait with such force that not only did the painting shatter, but the wall itself was left with a gaping hole. The sudden act of destruction left everyone in stunned silence. They had not anticipated John's drastic measure to silence the portrait. Sirius, in particular, looked utterly bewildered. his mouth agape as he stared at the remnants of the wall. Turning away from the stunned faces, John's gaze fell on Hermione, who had been watching the scene unfold with a mixture of shock and disbelief. With a casualness that belied the intensity of the moment, he greeted her. "Hermione, long time no see." Hermione, still trying to process what had just happened, managed a weak, "Long time no see, John." Her voice sounded distant, as if she were speaking from a dream. The silence that followed was abruptly shattered by a high-pitched scream. It was Creature, the old house elf, who had witnessed the entire scene. His reaction served as a stark reminder of the extraordinary lengths to which John would go to protect his friends and stand against what he perceived as injustice. Chapter 274, Temptation and Favor. Sirius Black couldn't quite describe his feelings. He loathed this house, despised everything it stood for. To him, his family, especially his cousin Bellatrix, felt like shackles binding him, leading him to run away and subsequently be disowned, his name blasted off the family tree by his own mother. Now, as he stood in the empty space where the portrait of his mother, a woman who fanatically worshipped pure-blood lineage, once hung, a strange sadness crept into his heart, albeit briefly. He allowed himself a moment of calm, admitting, "Good job, I've wanted to do that for a long time." Ignoring Sirius's comment, John drew the sword of silver Wick and laid its flat side against Sirius, who tried to rise but found himself unable to lift the sword's weight. All Sirius could do was protest loudly. John, having explored the Black family residence with evident interest, remarked, "This could be a decent house if it were properly cared for." Catching someone pointing a wand at him out of the corner of his eye, he raised an eyebrow and stated, "I don't appreciate having wands pointed at me." Lupin, understanding the gesture, lowered his wand, followed by Kingsley and then Moody, who also put theirs away. The room was bustling with activity, hosting not only two former Defense Against the Dark Arts professors, but also the head of the house and the Weasley family. Snape, with a skeptical look, questioned John's presence. "Did Dumbledore ask you to join?" He found it hard to believe Dumbledore would extend such an invitation. John shrugged off the question, saying, "Magic always has a solution, often lying in a small detail overlooked." He gestured with his fingers to emphasize small. Mr. Weasley, who had met John a few times before, found himself warming up to him, considering him a friend of his son. "John, have you joined the Order of the Phoenix?" asked one of the Weasley twins, who had just apparated in, proud of their newly acquired skill. John responded with a hint of jest. "No, but considering people have trespassed on my property and threatened my father, I thought it prudent to discuss matters with them, hence the Order of the Phoenix." John's knowledge of the Order and his displayed strength made it impossible for anyone to still see him as just a child. His casual request to be invited in, "After all, you need me, don't you?" left the room in a momentary silence. Lupin attempted to interject. "John, we don't have to," only to be cut off by John's indifferent reminder. "If I recall correctly, you're not a professor at Hogwarts, and this isn't Hogwarts. I'm not one to be easily swayed." Mrs. Weasley, still in her cleaning apron and holding a spray bottle, stood in disbelief, unable to fathom that someone Ron's age could carry such authority. Moody, acknowledging John's point, admitted, "He's right. We do need your help, John Wick. Podmore's illness requires your expertise." He gave Mr. Weasley a knowing look, signaling it was time to treat Podmore's condition. Mr. Weasley, understanding the cue, welcomed John inside. Due to Podmore's affliction with rabid dog disease, they had isolated him in the utility room. Hermione approached John quietly, asking, "Did you receive the letter?" John smiled slightly. "You could say that." Whether he intended to help was another matter. His primary reason for coming was to assess the strength of the Order of the Phoenix. With his dual identity as a Hogwarts student and someone capable of curing rabid dog disease, he felt confident in his safety among the Order, unlike with the Death Eaters. Hermione's presence surprised him slightly. He had anticipated Harry might join the Order, but Hermione's involvement was unexpected. "No, I'm just staying here," she clarified, indicating she hadn't officially joined. As John evaluated the Order's strength, he considered the formidable group before him: legendary aurors with extensive combat experience, Remus Lupin, an expert in defense against the dark arts, Sirius, the Weasley family, and King, slay Shacklebolt. Their magical prowess was impressive, with Moody and Snape standing out as particularly powerful. This gathering represented some of the magical world's elite. Gathered in the conference room with a clear purpose in mind, John took a seat and addressed the group with a composed demeanor. I can assist in resolving the issue, but I must inquire, what will I receive in return? He interlaced his fingers beneath his chin, adding, surely, I'm not expected to offer my services without compensation. Mrs. Weasley was taken aback by his audacity, and Snape, unaccustomed to such boldness from John, remarked with a hint of disdain, John Wick, you've changed since your school days. John responded with a dismissive click of his tongue. Mr. Snape, I am no longer your student, challenging Snape's authority and visibly darkening his mood. What do you desire? Inquired Moody, his magical eye surveying the room. He, along with Dumbledore, had taken note of John's capabilities. After a moment's thought, John expressed his interest. The Black family's collection intrigues me. We cannot consent to that without Sirius's approval, Lupin interjected with a grave tone. Let him have it. Sirius's voice echoed from the doorway, indifferent to the fate of the Sword of Silver Wick, which the twins had unsuccessfully attempted to enchant. John, seizing the opportunity, pressed further. Pleased to hear it, but there's the matter of the intrusion on my property and the affront to my father. How do you propose we resolve this? Moody, visibly agitated, demanded, What resolution do you seek? Simple. John leaned back, his demeanor turning serious as he pointed towards the door. I want his hand. The room fell into a stunned silence. Mrs. Weasley's eyes widened in disbelief, and Lupin, after a pause, attempted to lighten the mood. John, this isn't amusing. I assure you, I'm not joking. John's tone was flat, his intent clear. Attacking my family is a dishonorable act. As they hesitated, John stood and made to leave, only to be stopped by Harry's protest. You can't do this. You can't take Sirius's hand. John, frustrated by Harry's outburst, pulled him aside and stared into his eyes. Harry, if your family were caught in an undeserved calamity, I wonder if you'd still speak so lightly. This marked the first instance of John's harshness towards Harry, drawing the attention of the wizards present. Ron, finding the situation absurd, defended Sirius. He meant no harm, he merely wanted to erase his memory. Mr. Wick wouldn't mind. Ron, do not judge my father's actions by wizarding standards. He is a muggle. You'd understand the gravity if it were your memory at stake, John retorted coldly, then turned to address the room. If you wish to stop me, now would be the time. With his wand discreetly in hand, John braced himself. But be warned, I will not hold back. The wizards remained motionless, their hesitation a testament to their reluctance to confront John, who was not a Death Eater. To John, their inaction revealed a critical weakness within the Order of the Phoenix, their kindness. Snape, recognizing the gravity of the situation, remained silent as Sirius, accepting his fate, urged, Do it. Take my hand. You still possess the spirit of a godfather, John remarked coldly, the Sword of Silver Wick materializing in his hand. You may close your eyes, it won't be as painful as you imagine. Hermione, John softened slightly as she stood, her expression one of pleading. We apologize, there's no need for this. Hermione, you and I are alike, John acknowledged, his tone easing as he regarded her. Our parents are not wizards, they're vulnerable. In this moment, John's actions and words not only challenged the wizard's principles, but also highlighted the complexities of navigating a world where magical and non-magical realms collide, underscoring the profound implications of their decisions on those who stand on the fringes of their society. Hermione was rendered speechless, unable to fathom what she would do if someone subjected her father to such treatment. Sirius's expression darkened, and he extended his left hand, a silver light flashing from it. Just as he was about to make contact, John was halted. He turned to see Lupin, who sighed and said, We offer our apologies and seek to make amends. The Order of the Phoenix owes you a favor. Lupin's gaze met John's as he added sincerely, There's no need for us to be adversaries. This statement marked the Order of the Phoenix's limit. Crossing it could turn them into actual enemies. John's sword paused in midair, and after a moment he lowered it, saying calmly, Remember your words, Remus. The tension in the room dissipated as John sheathed his sword, causing everyone to breathe a sigh of relief. All right, where's the unfortunate soul? John had achieved his objective. Securing a favor from the Order of the Phoenix meant that his future endeavors would be significantly smoother. Podmore was brought forth, and with a mere glance, John took out a potion and carelessly sprinkled it over Podmore's wounds. Podmore screamed in agony as the curse afflicting him was lifted, though he did not transform into a dog, of course. Taking a magic book from the Black family's collection, John headed towards the door, pausing to say to Hermione, "See you in the new school year." He then left, adopting the demeanor of a typical student. As the door swung open, a familiar figure barged in. "Sirius, you must help me," Mundungus pleaded, clutching at Sirius's leg and wailing. Sirius, already in a foul mood, felt his irritation spike at the sight. "If you don't lend me the money, I'll be butchered. You're so wealthy, lend me some," Mundungus implored, his eyes bloodshot from days without sleep. John witnessed the entire scene, noting Mundungus's desperate attempt to borrow money from the Order of the Phoenix. Unfortunately for Mundungus, he failed to recognize the person who had just exited. Stepping outside, John found himself back at the junction between number 11 and number 13. Re-entering might prove to be a challenge, he mused, the corners of his mouth curling up slightly as he held the black-covered book. The discovery of cutting-edge dark arts revealed was an unexpected boon. Chapter 275, Malfoy Manor and the Death Eaters. Uninvited guests are seldom welcome at Malfoy Manor, yet on this early morning, as the perennial fog enveloped the estate in a shroud of gloom, an exception was made. For the first time, Draco Malfoy laid eyes on the man his father stood before, a man whose presence was as sinister as a snake. Lucius, struggling to mask his fear with a forced smile, greeted his master obsequiously. "Master, yes, this is my son." Accustomed to a life of privilege and power, Lucius couldn't help but display a hint of timidity in the presence of the dark figure who cast a long shadow over his heart. The Malfoy Manor had become a gathering place for the Death Eaters, with Voldemort himself seated at the head of the table, his cold, snake-like gaze instilling fear in those before him. 3 Death Eaters knelt, terror evident in their posture, as Voldemort remarked, "If it weren't for my loyal Death Eater, Lucius, I probably wouldn't even have a place to stay now." After wandering for a long time, Voldemort had finally found a loyal follower in Lucius Malfoy. He addressed the 3 kneeling men. "Tell me, why did you abandon your master?" Their fear was palpable, and they trembled as they explained. "Master, we were eliminating traitors among the Death Eaters." Voldemort's laughter, cold and mocking, filled the room. Narcissa, sensing the danger, took her son's hand, silently warning him to remain still. The other Death Eaters watched in silence, having been summoned to the manor by Lucius. Once his laughter subsided, Voldemort questioned them further. "Then why, when I summon you, do you not come?" One of the men, fearfully, explained that they had been deceived multiple times by someone using the dark mark to lure Death Eaters into traps. Voldemort, frustrated by their stupidity, subjected one of the men to the Cruciatus curse, his anger evident as he declared, "Idiot, I can sense whether they are loyal to me." As a master of legilimency, such tricks were ineffective against him. His anger stemmed from the months he spent wandering, only to be given refuge by the loyal Lucius. Reflecting on Lucius's loyalty, Voldemort's demeanor softened. "Lucius has been preparing for my return," he acknowledged, appreciating the efforts Lucius had made to gather a team of Death Eaters in his support. Apologizing for not rescuing another loyal follower, Barty Crouch Jr., Lucius knelt guiltily. Voldemort, in a rare gesture of comfort, helped him up, expressing his surprise and gratitude for Lucius's efforts. As Voldemort's gaze swept over the other Death Eaters, including Lippy and Bieber, who swelled with pride under his attention, he inquired about new recruits. Unbeknownst to him, his legilimency revealed only fear in Lucius, a common reaction, but no signs of betrayal, reinforcing his trust in him. Draco, witnessing his father alongside the man responsible for so much pain, felt a surge of anger. Narcissa, sensing her son's distress, quietly led him back to their room, leaving the dark gathering behind. The morning at Malfoy Manor revealed the complex dynamics of fear, loyalty, and power among the Death Eaters, with Voldemort at its center, manipulating and assessing the loyalty of his followers. "Tom, you've always been more cautious than I anticipated," John mused, reflecting on his departure from the Order of the Phoenix. With Harry's trial looming on the horizon, he glanced at Draco Malfoy's message and initiated contact. "Draco, restrain yourself. Do not resist, and avoid meeting Voldemort if possible. I'll explain everything once we're back at school," he advised, sending the message. John wasn't surprised by Lucius Malfoy's inevitable alignment with Voldemort. In fact, he had subtly encouraged it. Preferring Voldemort's operations to unfold under his watchful eye, John had meticulously laid the groundwork. He infiltrated the Death Eaters with undercover agents, preventing them from assembling in large numbers. By manipulating the Dark Mark, he had sown distrust among them, ensuring they stand its authenticity. Lucius, seizing the opportunity, corralled the Death Eaters at Malfoy Manor, a strategic move Voldemort couldn't ignore. To maintain the integrity of his plan, John severed ties with Lucius. Given the impracticality of mastering occlumency in mere months to shield against Voldemort's probing, Lucius had his memory voluntarily sealed, rendering him oblivious to his alliance with Johnny Silverhand. Contact with John would restore his memories. Lucius's sacrifice, John acknowledged, understanding Lucius's desire to spare Draco from his own fate. Eradicating Voldemort was the only path to redemption. After concluding the call, John's attention shifted to the basement, where a drop of fresh blood glistened. Harvested from Sirius Black with the Sword of Silver Wick, this blood harbored a power surpassing the loyalty curse, rooted in ancestral bloodlines. Focusing intently, John transformed the blood into a pendant, an elegant silver artifact. This pendant was the linchpin to locating the Order of the Phoenix, effectively unlocking their sanctuary. With the Death Eaters and the Order both within my grasp, the stage is set, John contemplated. He had considered infiltrating the Order through Percy, but refrained to spare him the familial strife. The dispute with Dumbledore was John's burden alone. Reflecting on the Dementor incident at Privet Drive, John realized Voldemort's influence over the Dementors was more extensive than he claimed. Recognizing their utility, especially as a threat to the Death Eaters imprisoned in Azkaban, John devised a plan to exploit them further. "We need a grand cage for all the Dementors," he mused, contemplating a scheme that extended beyond merely replacing them. Exiling the Dementors required a significant pretext, one that would justify their complete removal from Ministry oversight. This would allow John to transition them into a new confinement of his own design. After dispatching Riddle, his black long-eared owl, with letters to Barty Crouch Sr., John turned his attention to more immediate matters. "I require a new suit," he informed Tang Mi. "For a banquet?" Tang Mi inquired. "No," John replied with a playful roll of his eyes. "I'm attending the Ministry of Magic." He was particularly eager to witness Dumbledore's defense of Harry at the upcoming trial. Understanding the significance, Tang Mi contacted the tailor from the Silver Hand series, commissioning a bespoke ensemble for John. The resulting attire, a harmonious blend of green and purple robes, tailored to perfection and adorned with a gold watch chain, embodied the meticulous preparation and anticipation John harbored for the events unfolding at the Ministry of Magic. John stood before the mirror, the ring on his left hand catching the light as he absent-mindedly rubbed it with his right. A small, knowing smile played at the corners of his mouth. "Let's go to the Ministry of Magic," he declared, his voice muffled slightly by the silver mask that concealed his features. With a snap of his fingers, a green flame erupted in the fireplace, casting an eerie glow across the room. Without hesitation, he stepped into the flames, followed closely by Tang Mi. Chapter 276, The Ministry of Magic and the Audition. Stepping out of the fireplace, John found himself in the grand hall of the Ministry of Magic. The place was a spectacle of opulence, with dark wooden floors polished to a mirror sheen beneath his feet. Above, the peacock blue ceiling was inlaid with golden symbols that shimmered, shifting and changing in an enchanting dance. The walls were clad in panels of dark, glossy wood, and a gilded fireplace was embedded within, adding to the grandeur. John had arrived via one of these gilded fireplaces, having used the Floo network under the guidance of Old Batty. At the center of the foyer stood a fountain, around which a group of statues made of pure gold were arranged in a circular pool. These were the Magic Brotherhood statues, depicting a handsome wizard and a fair witch, with centaurs, goblins, and house elves gazing up at the two with adoration. From John's perspective, the Ministry of Magic certainly spared no expense in its decor. However, he mused that no amount of lavish decoration could compensate for a lack of substance in their magic. It seemed they aimed to commemorate their few hard-won victories, yet, apart from the house elves, the other magical beings like centaurs and goblins remained unconvinced by the Ministry's authority, especially the centaurs, who rarely, if ever, visited the Ministry. Meanwhile, goblins held sway over the wizarding world's finances. "Your Excellency Johnny Silverhand," greeted a smiling wizard. The security inspector, Eric, who typically wore a somber expression akin to attending a funeral when heading to work, was unusually enthusiastic today. His cheerfulness stemmed from Johnny Silverhand's generosity in funding a replacement for Eric's old comet broomstick. "Do you need to check your wand?" John inquired, offering his wand as a matter of protocol. Eric hastily declined. "No need, Mr. Johnny Silverhand. Minister Crouch is expecting you in his office." "Thank you for letting me know," John replied, nodding in appreciation before proceeding through the Golden Gate with Tang Mi. Eric watched them pass through, his smile fading as he returned to his usual grave demeanor. "I've brought a guest," announced a voice, drawing Eric's attention. It was Mr. Weasley, escorting Harry Potter. Eric's response was markedly lackluster, even in the presence of the famous savior. After all, Harry hadn't provided him with a Nimbus 2000, had he? Requesting Harry to present his wand, Eric inspected it with a sluggishness that could rival a sloth's pace. Beyond the Golden Gate lay a smaller hall, housing several elevators. As John passed, he was greeted with reverence, addressed as Your Excellency by the wizards he encountered. Some of Tang Mi's former colleagues couldn't hide their envy. Though no longer employed by the Ministry, Tang Mi's status had evidently risen far beyond theirs. "Your Excellency, please, after you," offered a wizard with a large beard, holding a big cardboard box. He quickly gestured for others to make way for John. The onlookers, recognizing the respect shown to John, smiled and insisted they were in no hurry, allowing him to proceed first. "Thanks, Bob," John said, acknowledging the wizard by name. This simple act of recognition sent waves of excitement through the crowd. Being remembered by Johnny Silverhand was a notable honor. The last person to receive such acknowledgement was Ozzie Hurd, now a candidate for the head of the Auror office. Bob's smile was so wide, it seemed he might accidentally release the chickens he was carrying in his box. As the golden elevator doors closed and the elevator began its ascent, John remarked, "It's quite the enthusiastic welcome, isn't it, Tang Mi?" During what was typically a busy time, they found themselves alone in the elevator. Tang Mi chuckled and shrugged. "I've never seen Eric smile like that. He usually looks as though he's attending a funeral when he goes to work." Power and money are indeed powerful motivators, John mused, absent-mindedly stroking his ring as the elevator reached the 7th floor, home to the Magic Sports Department led by Ludo. Speaking of Ludo, John casually inquired, "How much is left of Ludo's debt?" "Last time you intervened, you promised to exempt him from part of it," Tang Mi reminded him, hinting at the complexities of their dealings within the Ministry. Tang Mi, with her remarkable memory, informed, "The debt has been reduced by 5,400%. Now, there are only a few galleons left." She optimistically added, "It looks like it should be fully paid off by next year." As they prepared to conduct their business outside, the individuals encountered John. Recognizing him, they immediately halted and, with a smile, allowed John to proceed first. The elevator resumed its journey, reaching the 6th floor, home to the Department of Magical Transportation. On the 5th floor, John encountered Percy, who had recently been appointed as the director of the International Office of Magical Law. Clutching a stack of papers, Percy joined John in the elevator, sharing, "I'm moving out. My father thinks I'm too petty." His tone carried a mix of frustration and resignation. John chuckled in response. "That's probably for the best. It won't be too embarrassing, right? Mr. Weasley can't dictate your life." "I couldn't agree more," Percy replied, finding some solace in John's words. Upon reaching the 4th floor, the Department of Management and Control of Fantastic Beasts, Percy mentioned he needed to address the issue of illegal transportation of magical animals into the country. The elevator continued its descent, bypassing the Department of Magical Accidents and Disasters on the 3rd floor and the Department of Magical Law Enforcement on the 2nd floor, before arriving at their destination, the minister's office on the 1st floor. Entering the office, they found old Barty deeply engrossed in documents, his brow furrowing with concern. "Hope I'm not interrupting," John greeted, wearing a friendly smile. Old Barty, momentarily breaking away from his serious demeanor, stood up and warmly shook hands with John. "How could you be interrupting, Mr. Johnny Silverhand?" he said, a smile gracing his face. John noticed some papers on the table concerning Dumbledore and the Dementors of Azkaban. Dumbledore, as the chief magician of the Wizengamot, finds his hands tied by this title, limiting the Ministry of Magic's decisions on several matters, John observed. Old Barty, inviting John to sit, appeared more worn, with his short gray hair showing more signs of age. "Indeed, Dumbledore has made it clear that the Ministry has no jurisdiction over Hogwarts affairs," he said, a hint of irritation in his voice. John, playing with his ring, looked thoughtfully at Old Barty and remarked, "That's precisely why restrictions are necessary, Old Barty." Old Barty, recalling Dumbledore's assertive stance within the Ministry, felt challenged by his new role as minister. Glancing at the time, he suggested, "I trust you wouldn't mind accompanying me downstairs." "It would be my honor," John replied, standing up with a smile. Old Barty felt bolstered by John's presence, viewing him as a second king who could lend him the confidence needed to confront Dumbledore. As they took the elevator down, John, noticing a change, remarked, "Did you change locations?" Old Barty, maintaining a stern expression, replied, "It is only fitting to host our savior and first king in a more suitable place." Old Barty had little patience for those who defied convention, and Harry Potter, with his penchant for trouble, was a prime example. "He seems to stir up trouble almost every year," Old Barty lamented, reflecting on Harry's tendency to challenge the Ministry. Despite Harry's annual escapades since joining Hogwarts, which often cast the Ministry in a poor light, he was widely celebrated as the hero who defeated Voldemort. This public adoration irked Old Barty, who felt his own contributions during Voldemort's reign, especially his authorization for Aurors to use unforgivable curses against Death Eaters, were overshadowed. In his view, his efforts were comparable to Dumbledore's, deserving of recognition among the top contributors to their world's safety. Yet, the public's memory favored Harry Potter as the savior, leaving Old Barty's significant contributions largely forgotten, overshadowed by his own son's notoriety. If not for John's intervention, Old Barty feared he might have remained a forgotten figure, relegated to obscurity. This change in their meeting location served as a poignant reminder of their evolving circumstances. Reflecting on the actions of the elder Barty Crouch in the courtroom, and the man who had led the Ministry of Magic in the battle against Voldemort, the elevator descended to the 9th floor underground. This level housed the most enigmatic department within the Ministry of Magic. As John stepped out, his gaze was drawn to the black door at the corridor's end, his expression one of intrigue and contemplation. The Department of Mysteries lay beyond that door, a place shrouded in secrets and guarded knowledge. Old Barty, having taken a different path, called out to John from the staircase, "Your Excellency, please, this way." John, with a casual tone yet carrying a hint of curiosity, responded, "Oh, it's my first visit here." He cast a lingering glance at the black door of the Department of Mysteries. There was something within that he desired, but the timing was not right for its pursuit. Even Old Barty, with his considerable influence, could not easily access the treasures hidden within. They ascended the stairs, navigating through the corridors that reminded John of his days in potions class. The walls, illuminated by torches, led them to the 10th courtroom. Upon opening the door and entering, they were greeted with recognition. "Ah, Minister Crouch, and His Excellency Johnny Silverhand." The atmosphere in the courtroom was charged with anticipation and a sense of gravity. The mention of Johnny Silverhand alongside Minister Crouch underscored the importance of their visit. The air was thick with the weight of history and the shadows of past trials, yet there was an undercurrent of change, perhaps heralded by their presence. Chapter 277, The Courtroom and the Trial. John felt a shiver run down his spine as he heard the girlish, thin voice. Looking up, he saw Dolores Jane Umbridge, clad in a red robe with a pink collar peeking out. The sight of such a broad, slack-faced woman attempting to speak in a contrived little girl's voice struck John with an intense visual impact. Umbridge, surprised to see Johnny Silverhand approaching, greeted him with a giggle. "Your Excellency Johnny Silverhand, I believe this is our first official meeting," she said, extending her hand. Dolores Jane Umbridge. John was tempted to turn around and leave, but considering Umbridge's potential for blame, he reluctantly shook her hand before quickly withdrawing his own. "You sent me a letter. I've seen it," he stated calmly, catching Umbridge off guard. Barty Crouch Sr., dressed in a fuchsia robe adorned with a delicate silver W on the left breast, signifying his status as a member of the Wizengamot, stood out from the rest. John, in contrast, wore a purple robe and a silver mask, drawing whispers from some attendees. Amelia Bones, the director of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, was also present. She frowned upon noticing John. "Johnny Silverhand, you are not a member of the Wizengamot," she pointed out. Barty Sr. interjected, "Mr. Johnny Silverhand was invited by me as a consultant to the Ministry of Magic." "With all due respect, I've never heard of a Ministry of Magic advisor," Amelia retorted. Barty Sr. didn't back down. "Mr. Johnny Silverhand has provided us with invaluable information about Death Eaters. You are well aware of this." The tension between Barty Sr. and Amelia was palpable, but his words silenced any further objections. If Johnny Silverhand was indeed the source of crucial information on Death Eaters, his presence as a consultant was justified. Amelia cast a meaningful glance at the silver mask, but said no more. The other Wizengamot members remained silent, some offering John friendly smiles. The courtroom was a somber place, with walls of black stone and a chair in the center, its armrests adorned with chains. About 50 people were seated on benches that rose in tiers. "Your Excellency Johnny Silverhand, please, take a seat here," offered Dharma Alex, a fellow Wizengamot member. John took the seat beside him, engaging in a low, hoarse conversation about their mutual interest in the so-called savior and the progress of a blood curse paper, which Dharma Alex had submitted under John's real name to avoid drawing undue attention to him. As they conversed, Harry Potter entered the dimly lit room, his presence momentarily halting their discussion. Despite the poor lighting and their elevated position, John noticed Harry immediately. Harry, looking apprehensive and unaware of the Ministry's intentions, moved hesitantly. The environment, reminiscent of a scene Harry had witnessed in Dumbledore's Pensieve, seemed to weigh heavily on him. "Harry Potter," Barty Sr. called out, instructing him to take his seat. Harry, visibly nervous and only 15 years old, complied with a mix of caution and reluctance, the chains on the chair rattling as he settled into it. The courtroom fell silent, the atmosphere charged with anticipation as Harry prepared to face the Wizengamot. The scene unfolded not as Harry had witnessed in the Pensieve, but with him feeling both dizzy and nauseated, yet he managed to keep his composure. As he looked around, he noticed that the bright light in the room made it difficult for some members of the Wizengamot to see clearly, adding an air of mystery and tension to the atmosphere. At the center of the room sat Barty Crouch Sr., flanked by Amelia Bones and a woman who had a maternal presence. Harry's gaze also fell on Percy Weasley, who, despite the strained relationship with his father, Mr. Weasley, was present in his role as a recorder. Barty Crouch Sr. had laid the groundwork for Percy's future involvement in the Wizengamot. Harry felt a desire to greet Percy, the only person he recognized, but Percy avoided any eye contact. Despite Percy's rational demeanor, he seemed preoccupied with his own concerns. The trial commenced with Barty Crouch Sr.'s monotone declaration, trial on August 8th, the case of Harry James Potter of 12 Privet Drive, Little Winging, Surrey, for the breach of the Reasonable Restraint on Underage Wizards Act and the International Statute of Secrecy. The panel included Barty Crouch Sr., Minister for Magic, Amelia Bones, head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, and Dolores Jane Umbridge, Senior Undersecretary. Percy Weasley was appointed as the interrogation recorder. As Barty Crouch Sr. concluded his introduction, Albus Dumbledore made his entrance with a serene demeanor, dressed in a black and blue robe. Announcing himself as the witness for the defense, Dumbledore's presence commanded attention. Upon his request for a comfortable chair, Dumbledore effortlessly conjured a soft armchair with a flick of his wand, choosing to sit near Harry. Barty Crouch Sr. then proceeded to read the charges against Harry, emphasizing the severity of casting a Patronus charm in front of Muggles, a clear violation of magical law. When questioned about his identity and past infractions, Harry confirmed his identity and attempted to explain the circumstances surrounding his previous uses of magic. However, his explanations were met with interruptions and further questioning about the nature of the Patronus he conjured. The interrogation grew intense as Harry struggled to defend his actions, with the panel scrutinizing the legality and visibility of his Patronus. The atmosphere was charged with tension as Harry faced the formidable experience and authority of Barty Crouch Sr., along with the critical eyes of the Wizengamot. The trial not only tested Harry's resolve, but also highlighted the complexities and rigidities of the wizarding world's legal system. Amelia Susan Bones paused, her thoughts crystallizing into a decisive plan. "It was a stag, every time," she mused aloud. "Every time?" Barty Crouch Sr. interjected, his patience wearing thin. "Amelia Susan Bones, what we require now is a thorough interrogation." Amelia, undeterred, continued, "It's truly remarkable. It's astonishing that he can conjure a corporeal Patronus at such a young age." Her sudden praise left Harry bewildered, yet Barty Crouch Sr. understood her intentions. A young wizard of exceptional talent often inspired a sense of goodwill in those they encountered. However, Barty Crouch Sr. couldn't hide his irritation as he retorted, "You should be concerned about another student at Hogwarts. That boy managed to repel 100 Dementors in his 3rd year. We ought to be discussing his unauthorized use of magic in front of Muggles." Amelia fell silent, recognizing the gravity of Barty's warning. The room tensed as the implications of their conversation hung heavily in the air, a reminder of the complex and often challenging world of magic they navigated. Chapter 278, The Witness and Showing His Fangs. Enraged by their confused words, Harry raised his voice. "It was because of the Dementors." "Dementors?" Old Barty scrutinized him. "Can you elaborate on that?" "At that time, 2 Dementors appeared in the alley, and they rushed towards me and my cousin," Harry explained. "Do you realize the gravity of your accusation?" Old Barty sternly inquired. "Accusing a Dementor is a serious matter. Are you certain of what you're saying?" The members of the Wizengamot, except for John, whispered among themselves, visibly surprised by the mention of Dementors in a Muggle area. "I'm certain," Harry insisted. "They were there, at the end of the alley, making everything grow dark and cold. My cousin even came into contact with them as he tried desperately to escape." Old Barty pondered the reason behind the Dementor's presence. Dumbledore, seizing the moment of silence, cleared his throat. The Wizengamot members ceased their discussions and turned their attention to him, as if disciples awaiting wisdom. "We have a witness who can corroborate the presence of the Dementors in the alley," Dumbledore announced. "And I'm not referring to Dudley Dursley." "You may present your witness," Old Barty stated, maintaining a stern expression. "I have brought her with me," Dumbledore revealed. "She is waiting just outside." Mrs. Fig was then invited in. Being a squib, it was her first time in such a setting. Dumbledore conjured a chair for her comfort. "Your full name?" Old Barty inquired. "Arabella Dorian Fig," she responded, her voice trembling slightly. Old Barty gestured for her to proceed with her account. "I reside in Little Winging, near Harry Potter's home," Mrs. Fig began. She then detailed the Dementors' appearance in the alley, growing more confident as she described their actions. "They attacked the 2 boys, one fell, while the other dropped his wand and attempted to retaliate, but was ensnared by a Dementor." "Pause," Old Barty interjected, his gaze sharp. "What did you mean by blacks?" Mrs. Fig, her eyes filled with fear and confusion, explained. "I'm not sure. It was like black silk threads wrapping around the Dementor, which seemed terrified of it." "So, it was aiding Harry Potter, is that correct?" Barty Sr. clarified. "I believe so," Mrs. Fig nodded. "The black threads didn't harm Harry, but instead removed the Dementor." Old Barty turned his stern gaze to Harry. "Did you use the Patronus charm before this intervention?" "No, that black presence was unsettling," Harry began, but Old Barty cut him off. "Do you think this makes your actions more justifiable?" "Minister Crouch," Dumbledore interjected calmly, "the presence of the Dementors there was no coincidence." However, the current discussion revolves around why Harry Potter chose to use magic when he was seemingly out of danger, old Barty countered loudly. He then fixed his gaze on Harry. This isn't the first time, is it? Dumbledore frowned. Knowing old Barty was aware of Voldemort, he couldn't understand his current stance. Old Barty continued. I'm puzzled why the previous minister, Fudge, allowed a young wizard who committed such a grave mistake to go unpunished. In my view, losing control and inflating a muggle due to emotional distress is extremely dangerous. What is your opinion, defense witness? Dumbledore remained silent for a moment, realizing old Barty was expressing his dissatisfaction. As the chief warlock of the Wizengamot, you should be aware that using magic after the source of danger has passed does not comply with the decree for the reasonable restriction of underage sorcery, Dumbledore finally responded, subtly reminding old Barty of the law's nuances and the importance of context in such situations. Barty Crouch Sr. was well acquainted with the intricacies of the wizarding world's politics and law. He subtly hinted at Dumbledore's identity, suggesting that perhaps Dumbledore had forgotten his own role and responsibilities. Dumbledore, taking the hint, acknowledged, Perhaps I am no longer suited to continue in my position. Barty Sr.'s brief smile vanished as he sternly redirected the conversation back to the matter at hand. Let's not stray into irrelevant discussions. Harry, observing the exchange, was taken aback to see Dumbledore appear so diminished. To Harry, Dumbledore had always been a figure of immense power and wisdom. Dumbledore, with a calm yet firm tone, interjected, With all due respect, Harry Potter is still in danger. Sirius Black, despite capturing a Dementor, has shown no intention of aiding Harry. Barty Sr. challenged Dumbledore. That's merely speculation on your part, isn't it? Your witnesses have already testified. Dumbledore, undeterred, hinted at another piece of evidence. I have another witness who can confirm my claim, he said, his gaze drifting past Barty Sr. to someone behind him. John, feeling Dumbledore's gaze, remained silent, a slight smirk forming under his mask. He had no intention of stepping forward, questioning internally whether Dumbledore had forgotten their past conversations, or if it was simply Dumbledore's arrogance that made him believe John would assist. Barty Sr., with a hint of sarcasm, pressed Dumbledore. You claim to have another witness? Yes, Dumbledore affirmed. I am certain he had no intention of harming Harry at that time. That's your interpretation, Barty Sr. retorted, his tone laced with skepticism. The room was tense as Barty Sr. addressed the Wizengamot, asking for a show of hands from those who believed the accusations against Harry were unfounded. The vote was evenly split, with Amelia Bones and several others close to Dumbledore showing their support for Harry. Barty Sr. then asked those who supported the allegations to raise their hands, and again the votes were evenly divided. The deadlock turned all eyes to John, who remained non-committal. Barty Sr. suggested involving the Ministry of Magic advisors to break the tie, a move Amelia objected to, arguing that advisors were not Wizengamot members. Dumbledore supported the idea, saying, involving the Ministry of Magic advisors seems fair. Addressing John directly, Dumbledore said, Mr. Johnny Silverhand, I did not expect our paths to cross here. John stood, responding coolly, Principal Dumbledore, there are many things beyond your control. You are not omnipotent. He then posed a question that caught everyone off guard. Why, as a student of Hogwarts, am I unable to control my own magic, to the point of harming muggles? John's question implied a deeper issue. The wizarding world invests heavily in Hogwarts. We expect it to provide a quality education, ensuring young wizards do not misuse their powers. He concluded, I hope the Ministry of Magic will address the educational standards at Hogwarts. The room fell into a contemplative silence, as John's words resonated with many, highlighting the need for a thorough review of Hogwarts' educational approach. The tension in the room was palpable as the Slytherin dragon metaphorically bared its fangs at the Hogwarts phoenix. Old Batty's expression shifted, signaling his understanding of John's intentions. The voice that emanated from beneath the silver mask carried a sincerity laced with venom. I personally hold no ill will towards Harry Potter, the voice declared, its tone directed pointedly at Dumbledore. I am, however, eager to offer the young wizard an opportunity to demonstrate his reform. While I acknowledge that the accusations have not been substantiated, I do insist on the immediate implementation of Ministry of Magic's supervision, Principal Dumbledore. The underlying message was clear. It was time for Dumbledore to relinquish his position. As John resumed his seat, a chill emanated from his gaze, targeting Dumbledore directly. His internal vow echoed silently. I promised I'd settle our score, beginning with your beloved institution, Dumbledore. Ultimately, Harry was declared not guilty, albeit under certain conditions. Dumbledore found himself suspended from his role as headmaster, pending an investigation by a senior investigator from the Ministry to determine if there were educational shortcomings at Hogwarts. This suspension also jeopardized his positions as Chief Warlock of the Wizengamot and as President of the International Confederation of Wizards. Harry, for his part, couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction, believing he had played a role in Dumbledore's downfall. Despite this, Dumbledore appeared unfazed, offering a reassurance that bordered on humor. As long as I'm not removed from the Chocolate Frog cards, I'm content. However, Harry's mood was far from light. He found himself repeatedly haunted by the memory of old Barty's trial and the enigmatic silver mask. The narrative had taken a dark turn, with alliances and enmities becoming ever more complex within the hallowed halls of Hogwarts. The characters found themselves navigating a web of intrigue and power plays, where the stakes were as high as the positions held by some of the most influential figures in the wizarding world. Chapter 1. The Aftermath. Harry, please go back with Arthur first, Dumbledore instructed gently. But Dumbledore, Harry protested, his voice laced with concern. I still have matters to attend to, Dumbledore reassured him, his tone firm yet kind. As Harry reluctantly exited the courtroom, he cast a backward glance at Dumbledore, who offered him a reassuring wink, reminiscent of their past interactions. Outside, Mr. Weasley paced anxiously, eager to learn the outcome of the proceedings. Meanwhile, John observed Dumbledore, who remained in the courtroom. Barty Crouch Sr. exchanged a brief nod with John before swiftly departing. That boy disappointed me, Damo Alex muttered, shaking his head in dismay. He had expected the legendary savior to be markedly different, but upon closer inspection found him indistinguishable from any ordinary 15-year-old boy. The two exited the courtroom, their conversation trailing off into the corridor. Your Excellency Johnny Silverhand, may I have a moment of your time? Dumbledore requested, his voice carrying a note of formality. Dharma Alex cast a brief glance at Dumbledore, then at John, before excusing himself. John paused, sensing the significance of the moment. The courtroom gradually emptied, leaving only him and Dumbledore. Amelia Bones lingered for a moment, her gaze flitting between the two men before she hastened her exit. Now alone, John faced Dumbledore across the empty space. Perhaps this will make you feel better, Dumbledore began, his expression warm and inviting. I'm sorry about earlier. John remained silent, his gaze fixed on Dumbledore. I'm aware of your preparations against the Death Eaters, some of which may be considered overly aggressive, Dumbledore continued, conjuring two soft chairs with a wave of his hand. I believe a heartfelt conversation could bridge our understanding. John examined the chair beside him, his fingers gently caressing its smooth surface. Dumbledore, John began, his voice soft yet carrying a weight of contemplation. Who are you, truly? The headmaster of Hogwarts? No, that's not all. John's gaze lifted, meeting Dumbledore's. You're seen as a god, controlling everything, embodying mercy and wisdom, but even gods can falter. As John spoke, the chair ignited, flames enveloping it as his voice grew colder. When gods bleed, God's layers emerge. Dumbledore listened, stunned by John's words. You pride yourself on being a benevolent headmaster, yet the school's lack of practical education is evident. Your approach has left students vulnerable, lacking basic self-defense skills. John's critique grew harsher. You possess the power of a god, but are burdened with a human heart, leading to your downfall. Your reluctance to fully utilize your power against Voldemort has resulted in unnecessary tragedy. The chair reduced to ashes, the acrid smell of burning filling the air. John's gaze remained fixed on Dumbledore, his words a reflection of Dumbledore's failures and fears. You could have led the Ministry of Magic against Voldemort, minimizing casualties. Instead, your fear of power led you to form the Order of the Phoenix, a decision that has had dire consequences. John's final words echoed in the empty courtroom. a poignant reminder of Dumbledore's struggles with his own limitations and the choices that shaped the fate of the wizarding world. Against Voldemort, the unintended consequence was allowing him to gain strength unchecked. The Death Eaters garnered support from numerous pure-blood families, becoming a disruptive force in the wizarding world and leading to the tragic deaths of many Muggles. At that time, the Ministry of Magic was a bastion of talent, with Aurors seasoned from numerous battles. Esteemed individuals like the Longbottoms emerged from its ranks. However, Dumbledore opted to rely on recently graduated individuals like James Potter, refraining from utilizing the Ministry's resources. Furthermore, Dumbledore's approach to education was questionable. Despite knowing Voldemort had not been fully vanquished, he implemented a comprehensive teaching of defense against the dark arts. Yet, with each new professor restarting the course, students' progress was inconsistent. Without the Star Club and the trio, Hogwarts students this year would arguably be the weakest in history. Dumbledore's misplaced kindness and arrogance were his downfall. "Your failure stems from your contradictions," John remarked calmly as he walked past Dumbledore. "A god belongs on the altar." As he left, Dumbledore remained motionless, unable to respond. John revisited the black door of the Department of Mysteries before entering the elevator. "I'll make God bleed first," he declared. Old Barty was in high spirits, having chosen not to convict Harry Potter this time. The issue could be considered minor or significant, but it wasn't worth escalating. It was a concession to Dumbledore, aiming to subtly diminish his influence. Despite Dumbledore's formidable presence in the magical world, his authority was being challenged. "Regarding the investigator heading to Hogwarts," Old Barty inquired, looking at John expectantly. "Your Excellency Johnny Silverhand, who do you suggest?" "Old Barty, you're the minister," John replied with a smile. "But I do have a suggestion, Dolores Umbridge." "Her?" Old Barty frowned. "She was aligned with Fudge. We need someone to counterbalance Dumbledore. He's suspended his duties but hasn't left," John explained, his smile unwavering. Old Barty realized the logic in this. To counterbalance Dumbledore, they needed someone unafraid of him. Umbridge fit the bill, embodying the notion that ignorance breeds fearlessness. Thus, Old Barty made the decision with satisfaction, and John recommended another individual, Ozzy Hurd. "To reform education, we must strengthen it," John stated meaningfully. "The Ministry's resolve to reform education must be visible to all." While Umbridge was adept at management, her educational prowess was lacking. Old Barty acknowledged this, understanding the importance of quality education for future Ministry employees. The decision to consider Ozzy Hurd for the Defense Against the Dark Arts position at Hogwarts would be made after further review. The Ministry's involvement in Hogwarts education was a double-edged sword. As John pointed out, Dumbledore's laissez-faire approach allowed students to explore their talents, resulting in high achievers but also a significant variance in student capabilities. The Ministry's intervention aimed to raise the standard for all students. However, this could pose risks if future ministers sought to politicize Hogwarts. Yet, the primary goal was not to control Hogwarts education, but to limit Dumbledore's authority. The balance of power among Dumbledore, the Hogwarts Board of Directors, and the Ministry of Magic was delicate. Old Barty's intention was not to antagonize Dumbledore, but to slightly reduce his influence. Even with diminished power, Dumbledore's respect and stature would remain intact, aligning with John's perspective. The debate on whether to elevate Dumbledore to a near-divine status or to acknowledge him as a mere mortal was a significant one. It highlighted the dilemma of placing someone in a godlike position while expecting them to behave as a human. Following this discussion, another pressing issue emerged: the Dementors. Dementors have been in the service of the Ministry of Magic for many years, Old Barty said, his brow furrowed in concern. Dumbledore has raised concerns about the potential dangers they pose, and it appears his warnings are not unfounded. The challenge of locating and eradicating Dementors is not a simple one, he continued. Unlike ordinary guards, Dementors serve not only as sentinels but also as suppressors. Their presence drains the energy from Azkaban's prisoners, leaving them too listless to even contemplate escape or rebellion. This unique ability is rare among magical creatures and presents a complex problem for the Ministry. Chapter 280. Substitutes and bankability wizards who have lost their wands are not without threats, and there are places where the reliance on wands is not as absolute as it is in this country. Regarding this issue, John said with a hint of significance, perhaps there's a more effective solution. Huh? Old Batty looked at John, puzzled. Beneath that silver mask, an aura of mystery seemed to envelop him. Harry felt almost weightless as Mr. Weasley guided him away, his feet barely touching the ground, his mind overwhelmed with thoughts of Dumbledore. My God, I can't believe it. They actually interrogated you in the courtroom. Is this their idea of justice? Mr. Weasley, still trying to grasp the situation, led Harry up the stairs. I suppose so, Harry replied, his voice tinged with dejection. Arthur, Amelia Bones greeted Mr. Weasley warmly. Several other wizards were present, all showing kindness towards Harry. Barty Crouch is an excellent interrogator. You did well, Mr. Weasley said to Harry after acknowledging Amelia. Pulling Harry aside, he whispered, This is actually good news. I want to take you straight home. You can share the good news with everyone. Molly's planning to throw a party. It's not a cause for celebration, Harry muttered, frustration evident in his voice. Mr. Weasley, taken aback, asked patiently, What's the matter? Johnny Silverhand, he's here too, demanding Dumbledore's resignation as headmaster. Has the Ministry of Magic lost its mind? Mr. Weasley exclaimed in disbelief. At a time like this, with the Dark Lord's return? Yes, precisely now, Harry said, feeling a wave of nausea. They believe there's an issue with Dumbledore's leadership because a student was unable to control his powers outside of school, resulting in his aunt being blown up. I'm sorry, but no one will blame you, Harry, Mr. Weasley said, placing his hands on Harry's shoulders with a fatherly seriousness. You're doing great. Some things are simply beyond your control. Harry struggled to articulate his feelings, feeling as though he had inadvertently implicated Dumbledore. He had always hoped to support Dumbledore, but now it seemed he was powerless to help. As they entered the elevator, Harry asked, How did Johnny Silverhand end up there? They're calling him a Ministry of Magic advisor. That must have involved a substantial amount of money changing hands, Mr. Weasley explained. Crouch's superior must have sent a lot of galleons to the ministry behind the scenes. Harry, curious, inquired further, Is there any bad blood between Johnny Silverhand and Dumbledore? Sensing Harry's emotional turmoil, Mr. Weasley replied, I'm not entirely sure. They've always been mentioned in the same breath. What do you mean? Johnny Silverhand is shrouded in mystery. No one knows his true face, yet he wields considerable wealth and influence. Harry, still puzzled, asked, So, could there be a grudge between them? Shh, Mr. Weasley cautioned sternly. You mustn't speak so recklessly. He's targeting Dumbledore so openly. Who else but Voldemort could be behind it? Harry, Mr. Weasley's tone was grave. He's not a Death Eater. In fact, he's an even more formidable opponent than the Death Eaters. I can assure you of that. As the head of the department under the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, Mr. Weasley had insights into Johnny Silverhand's stance towards the Death Eaters, which was nothing short of terrifying. This man was not currently an enemy of the Order of the Phoenix. Confused and distressed, Harry's thoughts were a whirlwind. Johnny Silverhand's actions and motivations remained as enigmatic as ever. Exiting the elevator, they entered the nearly deserted hall. Harry noticed two wizards, a man and a woman, standing near the Magic Brothers fountain. How's Lippy? One asked. He's fine. No need for concern, the other replied. That mission took too long. Sorry, I can't divulge the details. Are you free this week? What, are you asking me out? Why not? You've changed. You weren't like this before, Arthur. Their conversation continued, a mix of personal and professional topics blending seamlessly. At the fountain, the witch, known as Ozzy, exuded an aura of beauty and allure, her voice captivatingly husky as she greeted Mr. Weasley. Good afternoon, Ozzy, Mr. Weasley replied, leaning in to whisper to Harry. She's a seasoned Auror who's recently been reassigned from fieldwork. Ozzy's attention shifted to Harry, her eyes widening slightly in recognition. Is this Harry Potter? She inquired, offering Harry a warm smile. The wizard standing beside her caught this interaction, a curious glint appearing in his eyes. It's been a while, Arthur, he said, addressing Mr. Weasley, who seemed slightly uncomfortable. Tangme, you're here, Mr. Weasley noted. I'm waiting for someone. Tangmi replied with a casual smile. Without any work, I find myself with time to spare. Understanding the cue, Mr. Bean, Weasley decided not to prolong the conversation. Well, I won't keep you, he said, ready to move on with Harry. However, Harry paused by the fountain, intrigued. He withdrew a pouch of money and generously emptied it into the water, his actions thoughtful. Harry pondered what Hermione would think of this gesture. Mr. Weasley, observing Harry, mistook his intentions for charity, unaware of Harry's personal vow. A sign by the fountain indicated that all donations would benefit St. Mungo's Hospital for magical maladies and injuries. Harry had promised himself that if he was cleared of all charges, he would donate 10 galleons. Now, he had contributed even more. "All right, Harry, let's head home," Mr. Weasley said, just as the sound of the lift gate opening caught their attention. Tangmi stepped forward, greeting the figure emerging from the lift with a respectful, "My lord." Mr. Weasley and Harry both noticed the silver mask, identical to the one seen in the courtroom, reigniting the tension Harry had just managed to shake off. Memories of their previous encounter in the cemetery surfaced, along with Johnny Silverhand's confrontational exchange with Dumbledore. Harry was convinced there was a significant connection between them. As the figure in the silver mask glanced briefly at Harry before focusing on Ozzy, Harry felt an unfamiliar sense of invisibility. This was a stark contrast to his last encounter, where he had been directly behind Dumbledore. Now, behind Mr. Weasley, he felt overlooked. Curious about Dumbledore's suspension, Harry was about to voice his question when Mr. Weasley intervened. However, the figure, known as Johnny Silverhand, halted and approached Harry. "Your Excellency, Johnny Silverhand," Mr. Weasley began, watching in awe as Silverhand contributed a substantial amount of gold to the fountain, an amount rivaling half a year's salary. "In both the Muggle and Wizarding worlds, hospitals hold immense importance," Silverhand stated, his voice deep and resonant, his gaze distant. Harry, unsure if the comment was directed at him, opened his mouth to reply but was cut off as Silverhand addressed Tangmi about a recent land purchase, instructing him to build a hospital that would offer free services to some patients. In that moment, Harry was struck by the sheer power and generosity behind the gesture. As Silverhand and Tangmi made their way to the fireplace, Harry, still processing the encounter, called out uncertainly, "Did he just speak to me?" "Now?" Mr. Weasley, momentarily dazzled by the prospect of wealth, replied, "It seems so."